I've been doing pitch videos since 2019. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them focused on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I want to make 2 compilations of all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe adjacent pitches so far, and then in the future I'll make more of them. This is number 1, so this video covers everything from 2019, my Ant-Man 3 or Ant-Man and the Wasp 2 or whatever you want to call it pitch, and ends in 2022 with my Great Lakes Avengers pitch. So I hope you enjoy, and like I said, we're going to start with Ant-Man, or as I called it in the pitch, Hi, Mr. Feige. My name's Matt. Everybody calls me Nando. It's a long story. We actually met on an AMA, your Reddit Ask Me Anything. I asked what your favorite scene in the Marvel Cinematic Universe was. It's actually a reference to a series I organized called One Marvelous Scene. Together, hundreds of YouTubers made videos about their favorite scenes in the MCU. It was pretty amazing, and thank you everybody who made a video as part of that project. They are so great. And I'm not gonna say that I believe that's partially why Endgame broke all those box office records, but I'm also not willing to write it off just yet. We'll never know. But I'm making this video because of the second half of my AMA question. I asked if you have plans for Ant-Man and the Wasp 2. Is there a script you guys are working on? Because I think it would be crazy to not be working on another movie in that series, considering how great those characters are, especially considering how fun they've been in the team-up movies. And if by chance you don't have a plan yet, I asked if I could submit my own. My pitch for Ant-Man and the Wasp 2. I've been working on it for a while now. I think it would fit pretty nicely into the post-Endgame MCU. And while you didn't answer my question about the pitch, you didn't not answer it either. So I'm gonna assume that's Hollywood speak for please pitch this to me. So I read you loud and clear. Here's my pitch for Ant-Man and the Wasp 2, although that's not what I'd call it. We'll get to that. So this pitch centers around 2 scenes that introduce 2 new characters to the MCU. One classic Marvel character and one that's been around for like 13 years. But I believe both can be part of a really fun and compelling story. Here's the first scene. So we open on a black screen in the year 2014, and right as we see 2014, we hear the beginning of the song Timber by Kesha. This isn't some random song. I believe this particular song is perfect for the scene for 4 reasons, which I will explain as we go. First reason, I just like the song. Think it's a lot of fun, and little advice, it's a great song to get people on the floor at a wedding. Way better than some dumb line dance. Trust me, as someone who has been a waiter at hundreds of weddings, Timber is a party starter. Second reason, this scene takes place in 2014, and Timber was a hit during 2014. I think music is a great way to set the scene in a certain time period, but it's always done with movies that take place in the distant past. I very rarely see it done with a movie that takes place in the very recent past. Like Iron Man 3 used Blue to set the first scene in 1999, and I think that really worked. Timber feels like a very 2014 song, and maybe now people remember 2014, but ideally people will be watching this movie in 15, 20 years, and Timber will remind people of what 2014 was like. So the song's playing, and a location pops up, Washington, D.C. Then we fade in on the Triskelion, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s headquarters. We zoom in through a window into an office, and we see a desk worker. His desk is a mess, he's on Twitter pretending to work, and he is listening to Timber on his headphones. It's the third reason I like Timber. He's just a normal guy. He's fun, he doesn't take us all that seriously. I'm sure a lot of the audience members will be able to relate to that. Automatically we like this guy. And I'm imagining this character will be played by someone like Sean William Scott, although I'm not married to any specific casting. And I'm sure if you gave this to Sarah Finn, she would pick the perfect person for it because she is amazing. But I just think he's a good pick for the role. If you aren't familiar, Sean William Scott's most notably Stifler in the American Pie series, but he's also done a ton of great work since then. He starred in Goon, which is a really charming hockey movie. He's also Country Mac in It's Always Sunny, a show that's especially close to my heart. And most importantly, he played opposite Paul Rudd in Role Models. The two of them have great chemistry, and the dynamic between this character, who we will name later, and Scott Lang is the key to making this movie a success. So this guy is online, wasting time, listening to music, and he looks up from his computer, and he notices that everybody else in the office is listening to something else. He takes off his headphones, and he hears over the PA system, Steve Rogers. Steve is making his famous speech about S.H.I.E.L.D. being infested with Hydra, which means this scene takes place on the day S.H.I.E.L.D. fell. We're going to see that moment from the perspective of an average S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. Everyone is freaking out. This guy thinks to himself. He comes up with a plan. The speech ends and the office gets chaotic. Everyone's yelling, pulling guns on one another. And instead of joining in, this guy grabs his phone and his key card and gets out of the office. And then we get this super fun little scene where this guy runs around the hallways of S.H.I.E.L.D. while all of the action from the end of the Winter Soldier is taking place around him. As he starts running, the headphones fall out of his phone and timbre plays through the phone's speakers. It's going to be the soundtrack for this scene. And that's the fourth reason I'm so in love with timbre for this scene. The lyrics to the chorus are, "It's going down, I'm yelling timber, you gotta move, you gotta dance." This song is mirroring the action taking place on screen. S.H.I.E.L.D. is going down. Steve is yelling timber. But really important, this guy isn't joining the fight. He's gotta move. He's just looking out for himself and trying to get out alive. And behind timber, we can also play the Winter Soldier score to give this scene a little gravity. And we can take this opportunity to enjoy some of the Winter Soldier action from another point of view. While this guy is running, he looks out the window and sees a helicarrier taking off. Out of another window, he can see the Falcon taking flight. Maybe we also see the helicopter Nick Fury arrives in. And I think it would be a great idea to have a cameo where Sharon Carter runs through a nearby hall, commanding a group of loyal S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. Give this guy another chance to join the fight, but he ignores it. And this guy comes to a room. He enters a code, scans his key card, and a big metal door swooshes open, revealing a huge cache of weapons. Tons of different guns. Even things like Widow's gauntlets and one of Clint's bows. This is the S.H.I.E.L.D. treasure trove. And this guy looks around in the cache. He's searching for something specific. And then he sees a weapon that is known as Coulson's Surprise. The gun Coulson uses to shoot Loki in the first Avengers movie. He smiles and he reaches towards the gun, but then he reaches behind it and pulls something else out. Something small, the size of a baseball. Then the guy loosens his tie. And listen, no one would love to give the characters from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. a cameo here more than I would. The problem is, during the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D., none of the main characters are at the Triskelion. Not Coulson and company, not even Bobby and Mac. They are all accounted for somewhere else. It's a shame. However, I think we can add another minor character who may be present during the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. So then, further back in the hallway, we see Patton Oswalt, who S.H.I.E.L.D. fans will recognize as one of the Koenig brothers. I think there's at least one unaccounted for who we could reasonably assume was at the Triskelion. Koenig notices this guy in the vault and says, "Hey you, what are you doing?" At that point, the hallway fills with smoke from a nearby explosion and Koenig can no longer see this guy. Koenig yells again, "Put down that weapon now!" We can't see exactly what he's doing, but the guy is scrambling with whatever this weapon is. Koenig gets closer, he pulls a gun on the guy. Last warning, opening fire. Then we see the guy, still partially obscured by smoke, as he puts a helmet on, closes his eyes, and presses a button. Koenig fires his gun into the room, runs in, and finds, no one. The room is empty. Koenig searches around on the floor expecting a body, but finds the clothes the guy was wearing next to a small empty container. Koenig turns over the guy's coat pocket and finds his key card, which he examines, and we learn the guy's name, Agent Eric O'Grady. We zoom in on the card, main titles. So this first new character is someone named Eric O'Grady. Ant-Man fans will recognize him as the third Ant-Man. He was introduced in 2006 in his own comic called The Irredeemable Ant-Man. And that's kind of his deal. Eric isn't a great guy. In the comics, he steals an Ant-Man suit and uses it for his own selfish purposes. He has fun. He steals things. He spies on women in the shower. Don't worry, we're not doing that one. He's not gonna be a creep. He's just gonna be a more carefree Ant-Man than we've seen before. So what's his deal? Well, Eric O'Grady in this movie is a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who worked on a secret project. Unbeknownst to pretty much everyone else, after Hank Pym left S.H.I.E.L.D., S.H.I.E.L.D. started developing their own Ant-Man suit. They used Hank's old schematics and some parts he left over and made their own suit. They call it the Black Ant, and it was supposed to be used for covert missions, kind of like how Hank and Janet worked for the government in the 80s and Ghost was a spy in the present day. And Eric was the agent who trained to use the Black Ant suit. He worked with this guy, Mitch, and eventually Eric was an excellent Ant-Man. But the heads of S.H.I.E.L.D. never approved his missions. They didn't want to risk Hank Pym knowing that the suit existed, so they kept it for emergencies. Also, this suit can generate Pym particles or something to explain why this one still works, even though he doesn't know how to make Pym particles. I mean, it's Pym particles, and the movies don't even consistently know what they do scene to scene, so who cares? And Eric became disaffected. He trained and trained, but was never able to do anything. So he got bored and started slacking off. And then S.H.I.E.L.D. fell, Eric escaped in the Black Ant suit, and it was pretty much completely forgotten about since most people people don't know it existed, and the people who knew about the suit assumed it was destroyed. But that's where things got difficult for Eric. He couldn't find another job since he didn't have any marketable skills and no one wanted to hire someone who used to work for the secret Nazis, so he turned to a life of crime. Nothing crazy, stealing food and things like that. Doing what an irresponsible guy would do if they got superpowers. So why Eric? Couple reasons. He is a great foil for Scott at this point in Scott's life. Eric is just like Scott with one key difference. Eric is not responsible because Eric doesn't have a family. He's all on his own and doesn't have that North Star to keep him moving in the right direction that Scott has in Cassie. So Scott has a lesson that he is perfectly positioned to teach Eric about the value of family and being part of a team. Eric is also fun because Eric can facilitate much more interesting action scenes, considering he should be far and away better at being Ant-Man than either Scott or Hope. It's easy to forget, but Scott doesn't have very much Ant-Man experience. He's trained once, he had a fight or two, did the airport fight, then took a big break, did Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then Endgame. He hasn't put in very many hours. Hope seems to be better, and she has practiced, but this has been Eric's job. It would be fun to watch someone who is a true pro at being Ant-Man taking Scott and Hope to school. Also, it would just be fun to lean into the wish fulfillment angle of Ant-Man for a little bit. There was a deleted scene in the first Ant-Man that shows Scott using his Ant-Man powers to cheat a casino. That's awesome. Let's use this moment to explore what someone with these powers would actually do. That's why I love the X-Men movies. They showed characters casually using powers. Maybe irresponsible, but it made them super relatable. And again, he is not spying on Captain Marvel in the shower. This irredeemable Ant-Man isn't going to be that irredeemable. Also, like I said before, the title of this movie would not be Ant-Man and the Wasp 2. It would be the even dumber but kind of funny title, Ant-Man and the Wasp and the Ant-Man. It's one of those titles, like Untitled Deadpool sequel, that I wish studios were brave enough to use because they are funny in their own right. Also, I just think it's weird that the first one is Ant-Man, and then the second one isn't Ant-Man 2, it's Ant-Man and the Wasp, which is a good title for that movie, but then I think it would be weird if we had Ant-Man and the Wasp 2 instead of Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then something added onto that. So that's one character, an antagonist. But Eric is not the bad guy. He's mostly keeping to himself. Let's talk about the film's villain. Here's how we introduce him. So there's this scientist named George Tarleton. Smart guy, bright future, and out of college he gets a job at an up-and-coming think tank. And at the think tank, George is given a grant to continue a project that he's been working on since college. George's research involves expanding the capability of the human brain. And George is making a lot of progress at the think tank. He has access to some incredible resources, and more importantly, the other scientists are helping George put together the pieces that he was never able to by himself. Eventually, George gets to a point where he's ready to conduct some human trials, and he goes to the head of the think tank to get approval. This guy, Aldrich Killian. Yeah, George works for AIM. You may not remember since its existence was pretty ancillary to the overall plot, but Advanced Idea Mechanics, or AIM, was the scientific collective created by businessman and Iron Man 3 villain Aldrich Killian. In Iron Man 3, Killian founds AIM as a front for his extremist experiments and terrorist organization, but, and this is a little bit of a retcon, AIM does have a front. Killian has created an actual think tank, staffed with actual scientists who have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. George is one of those scientists. So George has a meeting with Killian and Maya Hansen. George creates a hologram of his brain in Killian's office and he steps inside of it. The human brain. I don't want to be a cliche, but the brain is made up of billions of connections. These connections are how we learn, think, process information, create memories. And even though there are billions of connections constantly working together, there are limits to what the brain can achieve. The amount of space in the brain limits the amount of possible connections. George produces a jar of marbles. Think of the brain like a jar, and each connection is one of these marbles. You can keep putting marbles in the jar and eventually it fills up, can't put in any more. That's us right now. Even though it doesn't seem like it, our brains are full. So if you want to fit more marbles into the jar, what do? Get a bigger jar? George takes out another larger jar, fills it with more marbles. That would work. Only problem is, we're limited by the size of our heads. So then what else can we do if we want to put more marbles in the jar? You get smaller marbles. Turns out, it doesn't matter how big the particles are. The connections are the same. George takes out a bag of smaller marbles, pours them into the jar. If we can shrink the molecules in the brain, but maintain their ability to create connections, we can expand the possibilities of human intelligence exponentially. We can solve all kinds of problems. World world hunger, global warming, it's all on the table. Even the questions so big we don't know to ask them. Anything's possible. Our potential for intelligence becomes limitless. George confidently places the jar on the table. We have developed a process that we believe will allow us to shrink the particles in the human brain. We just need board approval before we can begin human trials. Aldrich gives Maya a positive shoulder shrug look. She makes the same face back. Aldrich escorts George out of the room. Great presentation, George. It's very intriguing. Now give us some time to look it over. Oh, thank you, sir. Once George has left the room, Aldrich asks Maya, well, what do you think? It's interesting. Doesn't exactly seem like what we're after. Of course not. Not the experiment. This. Aldrich turns on the brain mapping chip. Tarleton created a method we can use to map the human brain. It's the missing piece we need to finish Extremis. Maybe the rest of this will come in handy, but this is what we've been waiting for. I think we can finally get started on more testing. So George tells the other scientists that the meeting is a success, and then he waits for months. This kind of thing isn't unrealistic in situations like this. Moving forward on that kind of trial takes time. But really, Killian was working on his Extremis program and the Mandarin scheme, and eventually Iron Man 3 happens, and Killian is discovered to be behind the bombings and the Mandarin, and he's killed and all his goons are arrested. And so is the vice president. Like, not to nitpick, not unlike my podcast, mostly nitpicking, please subscribe, but can we pause for a second to appreciate how insane the plot of Iron Man 3 is in context? We don't ever revisit it, but a businessman created a terrorist and hatched a plot that ended up with him stealing the president, and the vice president was in on it. That is some Metal Wolf Chaos level nonsense, and it never comes up. It's insane. Anyway, Killian is exposed, the company is shut down, but the scientists working for the think tank side of things didn't know about any of this stuff, so they go free. And much like Eric O'Grady, companies aren't jumping at the opportunity to hire people whose only other employer was an evil organization, so George has trouble finding work. And George keeps in touch with the rest of the AIM scientists. It turns out they're also having the same problem. No one can actually get a new job. Some are planning to go back to school, but George convinces a few of them to work with him, create a new AIM, one actually focused on science. And George is successful. He starts a new legitimate AIM think tank with the help of a lot of the other former AIM scientists. But George has become a little impatient. He waited so long for his human trials that he doesn't want to wait any longer. George has done the math. He knows this is gonna work. So one night, without telling the rest of the scientists, George does what any good comic book movie scientist does and trials the process on himself. This is his life's work, and all George cares about is intelligence. So either this works and he's a genius, or it fails and he's an idiot. And in that case, George doesn't see that much to live for. So George goes for it, and the process is a success. Kind of. George does become far more intelligent, but instead of getting smaller marbles, George gets a bigger jar. His head expands to the size of a beanbag chair, and the rest of his body stays relatively the same, which looks very strange. The other scientists discover George the next day. They try to help him figure out a way to cure himself, but George does not want to be cured. He is even closer to succeeding. All he wants is some sort of chair to keep himself mobile so that he can continue his research. And he isn't George anymore. He is above names. But he says the rest of AIM can call him the mental organism designed only for computing, MODOK for short. The AIM scientists make MODOK a special chair, and he begins working. And he is a machine. He can compute faster than any computer. MODOK immediately figures out what went wrong. The particles he created to shrink his brain were unstable. All MODOK needs is a new set of particles, but he can't find any that are stable enough, and he doesn't have enough information to just create them himself. But then he sees the news about Ant-Man at the end of Ant-Man 1, and MODOK gets an idea. He can use PIM particles to stabilize his experiments. And MODOK doesn't know where to find Ant-Man, but he is able to easily decode the SHIELD files that were dumped at the end of Winter Soldier, and he figures out that there may be another Ant-Man suit out there somewhere. So yeah, MODOK, one of my very favorite Marvel characters. You've never heard of him. It isn't shocking. He's never been in a movie, although he is featured pretty heavily on the various Marvel TV shows and comics and games. He's a big evil floating head obsessed with science. So why MODOK? I think it's pretty simple. First off, he's awesome. Just full stop. MODOK is great. Isn't that right, video essayist and comic book expert Patrick H. Willems?
Yes, I couldn't agree more. As one of the internet's leading MODOK enthusiasts, I can confirm that MODOK is rad. Very rad.
Thanks, Patrick. Second, the way Eric is a fun foil for Scott, MODOK is a fun foil for Hope and Hank. Hope and Hank are very protective of the Pym particles. They don't want their technology to get into the wrong hands, so they hide it from the world. MODOK is the opposite. He isn't concerned with the ethical implications of technology, he's just interested in science for science's sake. And to be honest, I was never 100% on board with the Pym's philosophy. Yeah, their technology could be dangerous, but there are so many positive applications for Pym particles, and I'm not 100% on Team MODOK either, but I do think there's something Hope and Hank can learn from this. He can challenge their beliefs in an interesting way. Also, MODOK isn't a mirror villain. He usually arms his chair with lasers and other weapons, so even though one of the antagonists in this movie is another Ant-Man, the main antagonist of the movie would have a different power set. And also the other AIM scientists can have fun weapons, kind of like how Vulture just has a couple of super weapons lying around his lab, which are shown, but we don't see all that many of them used. These guys are mad scientists. They can have lasers and a freezing gun and whatever you want. It won't just be Team Ant-Man versus waves of goons. The other scientists can have personality. Also, this can kind of explain who Sonny's buyer was. I don't think it needs to be super explicit, but I think it can be implied that AIM was originally after the Pym lab. And I mean, yeah, look at him. I'm sure the people behind these movies could turn MODOK into a straight up threatening villain, but he's pretty silly. He's a big ugly head in a chair. Sometimes he looks like Elvis. MODOK would be the perfect villain for a comedy like Ant-Man, where the characters can call out how weird he looks and make jokes about it. Also, MODOK can resurrect AIM and make an AIM that is more consistent with its comic counterpart. Traditionally, Advanced Idea Mechanics, or AIM, is one of those recurring Marvel villain groups like Hydra or The Hand. They are a team of scientists who build super weapons and use them to overthrow the government. Kind of the same way in Luke Cage, we see Hammer Tech is responsible for creating those Judas bullets. That is what AIM usually does. And I get what they were going for in Iron Man 3, but I don't think it was really worth it to burn one of the most fun evil organizations in Marvel Comics to do so. But now we have a classic AIM existing in the MCU that can open up all kinds of new possibilities. Even if MODOK isn't in the picture, like let's say he gets arrested at the end of this movie, AIM can get new leadership, create new fun weapons. They'd also be great antagonists for the TV shows. So that's the pitch. Eric O'Grady has been running around for the last 10 or so years in the black ant suit, or as he calls it, the slaying mantis, because he's corny, and one day he slips up, gets on the news, and now everyone is trying to catch him. Team Ant-Man wants Eric to give up the suit and take responsibility, while AIM, led by MODOK, wants to get their hands on the Pym particles in the suit to make MODOK even smarter. It's a story about being abandoned and finding a family. A story about the responsibility that comes with a superpower. But mostly, it's a story about MODOK, a big floating head in a chair. So that's the pitch, Mr. Feige. Kevin, I feel like we've gotten close in these last few minutes. I can call you Kevin. I'm very easy to get in touch with, nandovmovies@gmail.com. Let's talk. Also, I have to thank Alexander Duran, who has been working with me on these storyboards. They are amazing. Follow him on Twitter and Instagram. As a favor to me, please. The links are in the episode description. It'll take you a minute. Hello again, Mr. Feige. It's me, Nando, the YouTuber who secretly writes all the Marvel movies and some of the shows. Well, I write the first 5 episodes and then I hand it off to you guys for the finale. I haven't seen any of them yet. How'd they go? Anyway, I want to send you a video with my next big idea. Like it said in that letter you sent over. Please, Nando, we're out of movie ideas, and we're going to have to shut down Marvel unless you give us another certified banger. Where would we be without your ideas like Make Sharon Carter Bad or third Ant-Man movie? We'd be bankrupt, I tells ya. I don't know why I'm reading the letter you wrote me, whatever. Anyway, I saw your ideas for Spider-Man, I had a few suggestions. Like, it says here, Tony Stark Weekend at Bernie's. It sounds a little grim. Also this idea, do a fashion show where Peter tries on 50 costumes for action figures. Feels a little transparent. I liked it better in No Way Home, where he was just constantly wearing different suits for no good reason. That was very clever. But I think the main issue here is that there's no story. It's just a fashion show and Tony Stark's corpse. So I have an idea, a pitch for a new Spider-Man movie that follows No Way Home, and I wanted to share it with you. Remember, don't share this with people, otherwise they'll all see it and you'll have to pretend we don't work together and make a completely different movie. This is just between us. And I'll try not to upload this to my YouTube channel, although I can't promise anything. Okay, so before the pitch, I wanted to look at the most important part of this story, the villain. especially since this Peter Parker's doing his own thing. The end of No Way Home was essentially a hard reset in the franchise, so we could kind of do whatever we want, which means this film will be defined by which villain Spider-Man is dealing with and why. Now, I saw your note here. The portal opens up with Willem Dafoe from Lighthouse and Morbius, but good. I like your instincts, but I think we need to do something new. So I wanted to lay out what I believe makes a good Spider-Man villain so you can understand my choices. There are 3 things. First, originality. Spider-Man has an incredibly deep bench, decades upon decades of zany, colorful, purple and green villains, so it is crucial that a Spider-Man movie attempts to tread new ground. Amazing Spider-Man knew to focus on Lizard. It made more sense than just trying to reinvent someone that already worked, like Dr. Octopus. The MCU trilogy took less iconic villains like Vulture and Mysterio and rewrote their power set and backstory to turn them into threats worthy of their own story. Really, the only time a villain has fallen completely flat for me was DeHane's Goblin. It just didn't offer any unique take on the character, and he obviously could not measure up to the performance a decade earlier from Willem Dafoe, so, why bother? Our next Spider-Man movie should probably center around a villain or villains we have not seen in live action before. Second thing, connections. My other issue with DeHane's Goblin, sorry to make you the focus, Dane, if you're watching this, but the good Spider-Man villains have a personal connection to Spider-Man. They're a friend or mentor or ghost from his past, and while DeHane should have worked this way, the movie did not nurture Harry and Peter's friendship. In fact, there were really only 1 or 2 scenes of both characters just hanging out outside of Spider-Man stuff. Well, you could probably say the same thing about Doc Ock. That relationship was so essential to the plot that the small screen time wasn't really an issue. The core conflict of this movie needs to involve the villains interacting with Peter outside of the suit. And third, that relationship needs to exacerbate the struggle between being Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Another villain who I think needed work, Electro, not only did not have a personal connection to Peter, he also just did not present Peter with any complicated choices. Stopping Electro wasn't going to hurt his chances with a crush. Spider-Man, and most heroes to be honest, is all about choices. He needs to make a difficult choice, and the villain needs to present a personal conflict to Peter that will drive the internal stakes of the movie. So those are my 3 villain qualifications. Let's talk about Peter. Where is Peter now? We need to ask this question because, where are we starting from? And where is the Marvel Cinematic Universe at this time? So this Peter is currently nobody, an 18-year-old, I guess, living in a crappy New York City apartment somewhere in Midtown, probably, considering the location of his big swing at the end of the movie. I was kind of curious about this, Kevin, and not to nitpick, not unlike I do on my podcast, mostly nitpicking. Sure, nobody remembers Peter Parker, but does he have like a social security number? I assume so, since he's taking classes to get his GED. I only ask because I want to know if there are any significant barriers we need to worry about. I'm going to assume he does and work from there. If I'm wrong, just let me know. His friends, MJ, Ned, and Flash, are going to school at MIT, located in Cambridge, Mass, just outside of Boston. And I assume, because he went through all this trouble to write them out of the last movie, they're at least going to stay away for 1 movie. I don't want to undo that immediately. Peter is also broke, although like I said, he's living in a New York City apartment. The average cost of one of them is like $3,000 per month, but maybe because of all the spaceships and alien invasions, the rent in New York City in the MCU is cheaper. Peter also does not seem to have any relationships with other superheroes. Spider-Man does, I guess, but Peter doesn't, so he can't just go to Doctor Strange for help, I guess. But he was in the Endgame fight, right? Or wasn't he? There isn't much evidence in Miss Marvel to suggest that he was, so maybe he wasn't? I don't know. So I'm gonna pitch a script that works either way. Another important question, what should we not do? Since, Mr. Feige, you have not told me which Avengers we can and cannot use, I'm not going to focus on any of them. I'm also not going to use any previously established main villains from other live-action movies or any villains we expect to show up in future live-action movies. So no Venom, no Carnage, no El Muerto, no Madam Web, no Kraven, no Chameleon, no Morbius. I'm not sure about the Sydney Sweeney Black Cat rumors. I'd love it if you just told me, but hey, I get it. You have trust issues after the whole 8 years later thing, but I'm not going to use Black Cat in this pitch either. I'm also not bringing back MJ, Ned, or Flash yet. Maybe in the future, but not yet. Also not touching Gwen Stacy, only because I think it'd be weird if Peter 3 told Peter 1 that he had a girlfriend named Gwen, and then the next thing Peter did was find a Gwen. Maybe it can happen in the future movies, or even at the end of this movie, but I don't want this movie to be about that. Last thing, I don't want to do anything that changes the status quo in any way that will ripple ripple out into future movies in a way that's significant, not destroying New York or anything that the other movies cannot just ignore. This is a self-contained pitch. And I think that's important. This is Peter's story, pure, uncut Spider-Man. So let's get to the pitch. And yes, Kevin, I saw the note about the cap. Not a big hat guy, but for you, Kevin, I will wear one. It's this dorky 10th anniversary hat that I got from Disney. What do we think?
Wow.
Okay, so here's where we start. Peter finishes his GED. He's super smart, so it shouldn't be an issue. He goes to college. He gets a partial scholarship to Empire State University, but still needs to pay the bills. So he looks for some part-time jobs. Pizza delivery, dog walking, temping. But the schedules make it different to keep the Spider-Man thing alive, and none of them pay enough for Peter to pay rent on his New York City studio apartment and tuition at Empire State University. Then Peter notices an online story about Spider-Man with a god-awful picture. Makes him look bad and super blurry. And Peter gets the idea. Fake Spider-Man photos and sell them to a news organization. So it goes to everybody. The Times, the Post. And even though his pictures are good, they can't afford him and don't want to hire someone who literally no one knows. He needs a connection on the inside to make this work. Then Peter gets another idea. He actually does have a connection, or did. Betty Brant is currently working for the Bugle, so Peter hatches a plan to use the fact that he already kinda knows Betty to quickly befriend her and get his foot in the door. Peter goes to a park where he knows she hangs out with a dog he knows she will like, meets her, and talks to her. He mentions that he's an amateur photographer who specifically follows Spider-Man around and tries to get pictures. Betty has an incredible idea. You know, she happens to work at an outlet that loves running stories about Spider-Man. Maybe she can get Peter a meeting with her boss? That would be incredible. And Betty introduces Peter to her boss, Robbie Robertson. This is a fan favorite character and crucial member of Peter Parker's circle that has not made it into the Marvel Cinematic Universe yet. And this Robbie acts as a liaison between Peter and J. Jonah Jameson, who has decided to turn over a new leaf and become less of an Alex Jones and more of a legitimate organization. He is still very critical of Spider-Man, but at least this way Spider-Man isn't working for someone who thinks super soldier serum makes the frogs gay. Peter also explains his rent problems to Robbie, and Robbie has an idea. Robbie's son Randy is new to the city and also looking for another roommate. Maybe Peter can move in with Randy. Peter is thrilled. Things are looking up. In the meantime, Peter is working hard at Empire State University, staying late, impressing professors, and he has a new lab partner in his organic chemistry class, a girl named Jenny. Jenny is also incredibly smart and driven. Where Peter is more interested in biology, Jenny is more interested in engineering, robotics, nanotech. She's really the only other person in the class that's on Peter's level. And Peter is sort of into her. He doesn't want to ruin things in class, but there's definitely chemistry. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hey, when's this Spider-Man movie gonna have any Spider-Man? Well, that is the third story prong here. Peter is dealing with a new crime boss in the city. When Kingpin was shot and killed, a power vacuum opened up and an opportunistic enforcer for Kingpin, a big albino dude with sawed down shark teeth who looks like a vampire, who everyone calls Tombstone. And Spider-Man is getting under Tombstone's skin. Spidey has stopped his drug dealing operation and beat up some of his enforcers, so Tombstone looks for outside help. He puts out a call for any assassin or superpowered freak who thinks they can take on Spider-Man, puts a $20 million bounty on his head, and the killers come out of the woodwork. So this is the A-plot of the movie. Spider-Man vs. Tombstone. This is also where we can work in some of Spidey's lesser known but still fun villains, guys like Tarantula, Shocker, and Overdrive. So with this new muscle, Tombstone starts his proper takeover of New York. So let's talk about these new enforcers. They're all pretty simple jobbers to make the action scenes a bit more interesting. And they can all be introduced pretty quickly in a simple montage, much like this one from Speed Racer. I feel like since we already have Shocker, and he presumably has not been transported into the Morbiverse, it would be fun to bring him back as a jobber. Maybe even use more alien tech to upgrade his gauntlet so it shoots full sonic blasts or whatever it is that comics Shocker does. Tarantula is a very simple character to introduce, assassin with knives on his hands and feet who is acrobatic. You can also give him some poison or something like that so we can keep pace with Spider-Man. And then we've got Overdrive. And I know what you're thinking, Kevin. That sounds a lot like Big Wheel, the character everyone loves but we refuse to use for some reason. It does. And he's going to be an amalgamation of Overdrive and Big Wheel. You see, as you know, Overdrive has nanotechnology that lets him upgrade any vehicle he wants into a supercar. And one of the vehicles he finds can be the Big Wheel Mobile, which is like on display at an old World's Fair or something. Spider-Man can even call him Big Wheel, but for reasons that will be obvious later, this character is James Beverly, aka Overdrive. And to be honest, besides the car far in the name, there's not much about Big Wheel to like. He's as one-off villains go. Every so often he's mentioned again, but he's not someone like MODOK, who has a cool design and a cool name, and also a rich comic history. So if a character with a little more going on, like Overdrive, drove the Big Wheel and even references the fact that it was created by someone named Jackson Wheel, I think that's enough. Or compromise open with Peter stopping the original Big Wheel, who is driving the original Big Wheel, and it's not great, but later Overdrive finds the Big Wheel and upgrades it into an absolute monster with tons of weapons, and it'll be a fun second fight. Is that good? I think that's good. And we can even hint that Big Wheel is being backed by Mr. Negative, who could be a great villain in the future for this Spider-Man, or maybe Miles, or even Silk if they ever show up in the MCU. Those nanobots have to come from somewhere, right? And I'm pretty sure in the comics, he is one of Mr. Negative's henchmen. So those are the three villains. They all take a shot at Spider-Man individually. One night, Spidey is foiling a bank robbery that Tombstone set up as a trap, and the villains make their move. They're not coordinated at this point, just sort of flailing at Spider-Man, but still effective enough to keep Spidey on the ropes. And that is where we get the introduction of our final principal character. Peter is saved by another costumed crime fighter who uses a flight suit equipped with various gadgets and calls herself the Beetle. That is Spider-Man's new ally here. And for anyone who isn't familiar, this is Jenny, Peter's friend from school. Traditionally, the Beetle is named Janice Lincoln, but A, Janice seems like an old lady name, and B, we already actually have a Janice Lincoln in Spider-Man Far From Home. She's one of Mysterio's teammates. That wasn't anything more than an Easter egg, so I think it's fine to have this character be named Jenny Lincoln. And like, we all know that her real name is Janice, but she doesn't use it. But what is her deal? Why is she helping Spider-Man, and where's she been this whole time? Well, it will be revealed later on that Janice is Tombstone's daughter, and she knows her father is going to destroy the city, so she came up with the Beetle identity as a way to stop him. That information will not be available to Peter for a while. In fact, for a good chunk of the movie, Peter will not know that Jenny is the Beetle, and she will not know that Peter is Spider-Man. But they'll still work together and have a fun Batman-Catwoman thing going on. This conflict will continue when Peter has the opportunity to put Tombstone away for good, and Jenny stops Peter. She doesn't want her father to take control of the city, but at the same time, she isn't ready to see him put away. She really only did this to keep him down long enough for someone else to take the reins of New York City organized crime, and then her father could slip back into the woodwork. Tombstone also would not know that Beetle is his daughter, although eventually he'd figure it out and use that to manipulate her into protecting him. And then the extra fun part, Peter's new friends Randy and Robbie are also traditionally related to Tombstone. In the comics, Tombstone and Robbie grew up together, so Robbie can be tied to the plot through their relationships. Our A plot and our B plot can coalesce when Peter learns what Tombstone's deal is. So why does it need to be this way? Why is Beetle, the friend turned enemy turned something in between, the perfect villain for Peter to deal with right now? Well, I think coming off of No Way Home, Peter needs a villain who is all his own, someone who has never played a big role in these movies before. On top of that, I'd love to give Peter some new allies. Robbie, Ralph, and even Jenny can help Peter develop as a character. Jenny is burdened with great responsibility, but instead of being burdened towards helping all mankind, Jenny's responsibility is to protecting her family. Robbie is in a difficult position with an old friend, but ultimately does the right thing and helps defeat him. And Ralph is just a friend of Peter's. And Tombstone brings a lot to the table outside of just being Jenny's father. He's a crime boss, which this Peter has never dealt with, at least not on screen. And crime bosses are a huge part of Spider-Man's identity in the comics. Besides his connection to Kingpin, you've got guys like Hammerhead and Silvermane. It is always fun to watch Spider-Man bust up the mob. You know, going off of that, we've actually never seen Peter do a lot of things. He has never made a friend his age. He has never fought a villain his age. He's never had a job. He's never had a romance with a villain. There are so many new experiences for Peter, and Jenny works with all that. Also, Beetle can fly, and I would love to see this Peter Parker fight a flying villain. And I know what you're gonna say. All of his villains fly, sure. But he never fights Vulture in the air, or Mysterio, or Goblin. Sure, the train fight in Spider-Man 2 is amazing, but that fight from Spider-Man 3 is also so much fun. If it wasn't for the fact that this Goblin was very dumb, watching Spider-Man swing through the city and attempt to keep up with a villain who can fly is an interesting challenge for Peter. And this Peter almost never swings through the city. I don't know why. The closest we get is this scene in Infinity War where he's trying to keep up with Ebony Maw. But besides that, none of Spidey's action scenes involve Spidey navigating New York City using skyscrapers. And since we've already used Vulture, I'm Mysterio, Electro, and Green Goblin, there are very few flying villains left to utilize. Beetle is also a technology villain, and at this point in his life, Peter is out of fancy nanotech and instant kill modes and stuff like that, so it would be fun to force Peter to fight a villain with all of those advantages, especially since his mentor was Tony Stark, a mechanical engineer who created and wore a weaponized suit of armor. Beetle is Peter fighting an evil version of one of his father figures. Beetle is great. She can fly. She can be an anti-hero. She can flirt with Peter. She has an interesting connection to the real villain of the story, Tombstone. She would be an interesting friend or enemy in the future, and she has never been done before. And in the future, Beetle has a lot of spin-off potential. She could create the superior foes of Spider-Man, a spin-off of the Sinister Six featuring a couple of C-list Spider-Man villains who spend most of their time bickering and ripping off mob bosses. We've already got Beetle, Shocker, and Overdrive. Boomerang could even be introduced as a third roommate for Peter and Randy somewhere down the line, kind of like he is in the Nick Spencer Spider-Man comics. Beetle could also join the Thunderbolts. In the original Thunderbolt story, Baron Zemo recruited a team of supervillains and disguised them as superheroes. One of the team members was the original Beetle, Abner Jenkins, who took on the new ability of Mach 1. Jenny Lincoln could take his place on Zemo's team in a future Thunderbolts movie. More importantly, Beetle can help Peter better understand his new place in the world. Because of his connections to Tony Stark and Doctor Strange, sure, Peter was a vigilante, but he never needed to deal with the problems that usually come with that sort of work. He was never hunted by the police. He never had people in his life with strong opinions about Spider-Man who didn't know his secret. Beetle can help bridge that gap. She is also a vigilante with a very specific goal, stop her father, and she's working the wrong side of the law, but Peter needs to learn why that's sometimes worth it and why he will ultimately need to get comfortable being a true vigilante. And at the same time, Peter can teach Beetle about family. He's already dealt with a father who did crimes to support his family with Vulture, and a pair of villain fathers in Sandman and Goblin. Also, if Beetle is a little more like extreme, ready to kill, Peter can pull her back with the lessons he learned from the other Peters. In conclusion, Mr. Feige, this movie has everything. High-flying action, romance, family, the Shocker, and of course the potential for multiple spin-offs without being too in your face about it. Also, I saw your note about the title. The home thing is dumb. It was cute for 1 second, but after we did 2, we realized we were in too deep. I completely agree, so I ditched that too. I think we should call this, well, we should have been calling these movies from the beginning, The Spectacular Spider-Man, and use the subheading Extermination. Because of the bugs. See, just not a hat guy. I don't, like, look at this. You're gonna hide this under a hat? As weird and cool as this hat is with all this stuff on it, it's not worth it. There we go. Into the box it goes. Now it's on the floor. Okay. Hello again, Kevin Feige. It's me, Nando, the YouTuber who secretly writes all the Marvel movies and the shows now, like She-Hulk, which I love. Like, I'm so digging that show. I think it's so great. Congratulations to everybody who's working on it, which again is me, because I secretly write all the movies and shows. Anyway, first, let me apologize for accidentally uploading the Spider-Man 4 pitch to my YouTube channel. It's confusing. You see, I saw the button labeled public had a green eye icon, and you have green eyes, so I assumed that meant it would be public for people with green eyes, and how many of those are there in the world? Like 15, 20? So, thought I was safe. Anyway, got your new letter. Dear Nando, it's me again, Kevin Feige. I wear a lot of hats. We're doing Secret Wars. Can you believe it? Anyway, pitch me a Thunderbolts movie. Okay, bye. And yeah, I can do that. I actually do have some ideas for a Thunderbolts movie that I'm so excited to show to you. And I know you guys are working on a Thunderbolts movie now. So I will send you this video and it will be completely secret. And you can announce all of it at the D23 convention. I am so excited and I will not make this one public again. And if I did, I guess you'd have to change all the things I said and just do a pretty different movie with some of the same characters and maybe a similar plot line. So let's start with the question, what are the Thunderbolts? Like, I know, and you know, but going over it helps set the stage for the pitch. In Marvel Comics, there are two things. You see, in the 1990s, there was a comic event called Onslaught that ended with a bunch of the superheroes being trapped in a pocket dimension, which left a literal and figurative power vacuum in the Marvel Universe. And then, this group of heroes called the Thunderbolts showed up, led by a character named Citizen V. And it turned out that the Thunderbolts were actually a group of supervillains, and Citizen V was none other than Baron Zemo. But the fun thing about the Thunderbolts is that the other villains masquerading as heroes realized, during their reign, that being a hero is better than being a villain, and some of them reformed. More recently, they've been turned into what is basically Marvel's Suicide Squad, a group of supervillains and anti-heroes that run Black Ops missions led by General Thunderbolt Ross. The Thunderbolts, like the Suicide Squad, have had a relatively fluid roster over the years, although there are a couple of mainstays. And I agree that now is the perfect time for a Thunderbolts movie. Besides the fact that we are finally at the point in the Marvel Cinematic Universe where we have enough living villains to fill a roster, there also seems to be a shift away from movies focused on original heroes and towards other smaller stories in the MCU. So let's look at this pitch. First things first, I'm sure you're wondering, will we do the villains disguised as heroes Thunderbolts or the Marvel Suicide Squad Thunderbolts? Yes, I will explain everything as we go, trust me, it will make sense. But I want to start this pitch, Mr. Feige, by showing you a scene from the movie. This is how I would open Thunderbolts. We open on the floating supervillain prison known as The Raft. Secretary Ross gets out of a helicopter. Since William Hurt died before he could film this, maybe we can see the back of his head, and then we recast him, like Bruce Greenwood or something, I don't know. We follow Ross through some hallways as he's briefed on the current inmates of The Raft. He passes Zemo, who's in his cell reading a book. Zemo is unfazed. And as Ross passes Zemo, an alarm goes off. We shift focus to Zemo, who gets worried as all the guards rush in one direction. And we hear something breaking out of the prison and defeating the guards one by one. Zemo tries to break free from his cell. He pulls out a phone that he's been hiding in his book and attempts to hack the locking mechanism. And suddenly, guards begin being thrown down this hallway. And Zemo sees three figures pass by. First is a 7-foot-tall metal man, holding an unconscious Ross. And following them is Samuel Stearns, aka The Leader. Big forehead, green skin, the whole nine. And as Stearns is floating through the hallway, he makes eye contact with Zemo, who is concerned that this escape might kill him. Stearns attempts to telepathically attack Zemo, but Ross wakes and shoots Stearns. Stearns takes the shot and is distracted momentarily. The metal man knocks out Ross. Stearns heals from the shot, and they continue down the hallway, ignoring Zemo. Zemo manages to open his cell door using the phone, he can hack, whatever, and he tries to escape, but the only helicopter has just left with Stearns, Ross, and the metal man. As the three are leaving, Stearns telekinetically damages the doors on the roof so they can't fully close. How do we know he did that? Head on hand and Kirby crackle, but now that they're out, the base is starting to sink, and the sunroof is open. Zemo rushes through the base looking for a way to turn off the mechanism that lowers the base underwater. He passes a few familiar faces, Ghost, some She-Hulk villains, a frost giant. He steals keycards from a bunch of unconscious guards before getting to the control room, which was partially destroyed. He can see through a window made of bulletproof glass that some of the terminals still seem to be working, but that won't be of much use since everyone inside the room is knocked out and the door is blocked by heavy debris. Then Zemo remembers Ghost and realizes she can be useful. She is also worried about what's going on. Zemo hacks through her cell the same way he broke through his, which deactivates some sort of field keeping her from phasing, and Ghost escapes. Zemo explains what's happening. The raft is sinking. What? We're in the middle of the ocean and we're all going to die unless you get me into that room. What are you going to do? I need to get to the controls and raise the base. Okay. And Ghost phases through the door and goes to the computer. She begins to search through the control programs. Zemo screams, "You need to let me in! I can do this myself." "No, you can't." Ghost ignores Zemo. Zemo goes back to some of the unconscious guards and finds a gun. As he gets to the guards, he realizes some of the base is already filling with water. The prisoners realize too and ask Zemo to free them. Zemo ignores the prisoners, takes the gun, and attempts to use it to break through the bulletproof glass, but glass is bulletproof, so it doesn't work. Zemo yells again, "We're still sinking!" Not helping. Zemo tries to find something he can use to pry the door open. Finds an axe, wedges it between the door, and starts to push. Zemo is straining, the water is rising, the other prisoners are panicking, and he's not having any luck. Zemo screams to Ghost, "You're out of time. You have doomed us all. Shut up." Zemo keeps trying to open the door. The water is starting to really rush through. Tension, tension, tension. Zemo goes into his pocket and pulls out a picture of his family, ready to look at it one last time before he drowns. And then the base stops, and it begins to rise. The water drains. Zemo looks to Ghost, who successfully managed to save everyone. She gives him a look. Ghost phases out of the room and back into the hallway with Zemo. "You were saying?" Zemo points the gun at Ghost. You should have helped me get into the room. We all could have died. What are you talking about? I saved us. But what if you failed? I didn't. You're all useless. We all? Metahumans. Can't take orders. Think you're all superior. Well, I'm the one who saved your life, so maybe I am. At that moment, the guards begin waking up and find Zemo and Ghost out of their cells. The guards surround them and both villains surrender. Next scene. Val is watching a recording of the incident. She talks to a politician. I didn't even know Stearns was alive. Well, it's classified. Classified? I'm a United States senator. And yet, he was classified. He didn't look like that before. It seems the gamma infection from Banner's blood transformed Stearns into this. He also has telepathy and telekinesis, and the ability to heal quickly. And no one knew. It was undetectable. Apparently, he was telepathically communicating with Creel, planning the escape. But why now? They must have been waiting until Secretary Ross was on the base, and they only took Ross. That's what it looks like. Do we have any idea where they're taking him? We're not sure, but I do have a guess, which is classified. What do you need? I need a team. You want your own Avengers? Val looks at the recording, now paused on Zemo holding the gun to Ghost. No, this requires something different. What do you have in mind? Title card, just like the original Avengers, Thunderbolts. So that's your premise. In case, Kevin, you have not seen Incredible Hulk in a while, because it's the one that's not on Disney Plus, along with the Spider-Mans, Samuel Stearns was a scientist who was working with Bruce Banner to find a cure for Banner's condition. After meeting Banner, Stearns attempted to duplicate the process on Emil Blonsky and created the Abomination. In the process, Stearns was accidentally infected with Blonsky's blood and he went into a coma. There is some backstory in the Fury's Big Week comic, but I don't think that's canon anymore. In this version of the story, concerned that Stearns may have gained abilities as a result of the accident, at the time General Ross had Stearns imprisoned on the raft. While imprisoned and still in the coma, Stearns' head doubled in size and his skin turned green. He never showed any signs of improvement, until one day Stearns woke up and orchestrated a breakout on the raft. He'd apparently been coordinating the breakout telepathically with one of the other inmates named Carl Creel, who goes by the codename Absorbing Man. We can learn in Loki Season 2 that decades ago, Loki poisoned a man from Earth with a serum that gave him the ability to absorb whatever he touches. Creel was in suspended animation since any material used to imprison him could also be something he could absorb and use to escape, so he was in a medically induced coma until a cure for his condition could be found. So Kevin, I bet you're saying to yourself, wait a second, the bad guy for this pitch is the leader? That is a genius move, but something like that might already be happening. It's unclear who is pulling the strings on She-Hulk, but Stearns certainly seems like someone who could be the big bad. I mean, you, Kevin Feige, know, but you can't tell me, even though I wrote She-Hulk, so I should know too. Like I said, I wrote the She-Hulk, so whatever. Well, first off, I'm not convinced that the She-Hulk bad guy is Stearns. It makes way more sense to me if it's someone like General Ross, because, not to spoil the show, and I don't know this, but like his whole thing is trying to steal Hulk blood, and that's what ends up turning him into Red Hulk, kind of. Or it could be the Power Broker, since she loves to broker power, or Skrulls, or Val, or MODOK. So it could be any of those characters, but Stearns is possible. But Kevin, this is not a prediction as much as it's just my ideal Thunderbolts story. You'll see why it can pretty much only be Stearns by the time you get to the end of this pitch. But yes, I am aware that Stearns may show up in something soon that makes the pitch not line up timeline-wise, but if that's the case, who cares? We'll retcon it away in a few years anyway. You may also be wondering, why is Ghost in jail? She did not used to be in jail. Well, in Ant-Man and the Wasp, she was still a fugitive, so I guess in this timeline, she got caught and brought to jail for a crime she committed in the past. Simple enough. So what does Val do next? She gets her Thunderbolts. Zemo is sitting in his jail cell reading a book. He is approached by Val. Valentina Allegra de Fontaine. To what do I owe the pleasure? Am I getting a medal? You're lucky we didn't take that phone away. I might need it. You never know when another one of your metahumans is going to break out and I'm going to need to fix your mess. Funny, I heard it was Ghost who saved everyone. Is there something you want? I want to offer you your freedom. In exchange for, all you need to do is lead a team to stop Stearns and save Ross. Oh, that's all. I don't know if you saw the tapes, but that's a little above my weight class. Well, lucky for you, we have some heavyweights of our own. A team specifically designed to stop Stearns. You mean metahumans? No thank you. You're scared? I've dealt with too many of them, and every time, disaster. They cannot be controlled. Yeah, but if you aim them in the right direction, you can get a lot done. And sure, you may lose a few in the process, but that's a sacrifice I think you're willing to make. They're expendable. Means the team is made of other prisoners. What could be so valuable that you would risk freeing a terrorist and a team of super criminals? That is not your concern. All you need to do is intercept Stearns and Creel and save Ross, and you're a free man. How do I know I can trust you? Well, I don't think you have a choice, unless you have other offers. I've plenty of reading to catch up on. Then please, don't let me keep you. However, it should be obvious that this is time sensitive. My helicopter leaves in 10 minutes. Why me? You're capable, resourceful, a leader. I believe you are one of the few people on the planet that can catch them. And I know you're willing to do what's necessary if it comes to it. Or if it doesn't. Isn't this the type of problem that your Avengers would solve? And there are no Avengers. Tony Stark is dead. The Vision is dead. Black Widow is dead. T'Challa dead. Scarlet Witch missing, probably dead. Steve Rogers disappeared. Thor is gone. Carol Danvers is gone. We're down to a bunch of wizards nobody can find and a couple of free agents like your friend Sam. What about Banner? I hear he has a cousin now. This particular mission requires discretion. Not exactly Banner's strong suit. Plus, we don't see eye to eye. You know the damage these superhumans can do. The danger they represent. I understand why you did what you did, and I believe these two, Stearns and Creel, represent an existential threat to the human race. If you're the man I think you are, you'll want to stop them before they create another Sokovia. Val begins to leave. This is the part where you ask me who's on the team. Well, you already know John Walker, that buffoon, that super strong and loyal buffoon. Then we've got your friend Miss Starr, a Black Widow, a billionaire weapons expert, a mechanical genius, a woman with a voice that can bend steel, and a tank. Well, where are we going? We are not going anywhere. I'm dropping you and your new teammates off as close as I can to their location, and you're gonna do the rest. I'm assuming you know where to find them. Their destination is an abandoned SHIELD base somewhere in Mexico. We've lost their trail, but that's where they're going. Your mission is to find it, kill Stearns and Creel, and get out. Ideally with Ross, if he's still alive. So I want to describe my ideal roster by answering these 3 questions about each character. Who are they? What can they do? Why are they on the team? Who are they? Helmut Zemo was a commander of the Sokovian Special Forces whose family was killed during the Battle of Sokovia. He blamed the Avengers for the death of his family and successfully put together and executed a plan to disassemble the Avengers that involved bombing the United Nations. He is currently imprisoned in the Raft. What can they do? Zemo is a brilliant strategist. Because of his years of fencing as a child, Zemo is especially skilled with the sword. Zemo is also an excellent leader. Why are they on the team? Val needs someone on the Thunderbolts who can command the team in the field, since Val cannot interact with the Thunderbolts during their mission. In exchange for his cooperation, Val has offered Zemo a full pardon. Who are they? Ava Starr, aka Ghost, was in an accident as a child and gained the ability to phase through solid objects. She suffered from chronic pain as a result of the accident and spent her life working for SHIELD as an assassin while they worked on a cure for her condition. She was abandoned by SHIELD and forced to try to find her own cure with her surrogate father, Bill Foster, which led to the events of Ant-Man and the Wasp. What can they do? Ghost is a master spy with the ability to walk through walls. As a result of the intervention of Janet Van Dyne, her condition was stabilized and she had even more control of her abilities. Why are they on the team? While Ghost was cleared of US crimes, when SHIELD fell and it was revealed that she was working for Hydra, Ghost still committed numerous overseas actions that have turned her into an international fugitive. Val has managed to negotiate some sort of complete pardon in exchange for her working with the Thunderbolts. Who are they? Justin Hammer was a weapons manufacturer who considered himself a rival to Tony Stark. He worked heavily with the government, especially after Stark Industries stopped manufacturing weapons. He was always jealous of Tony Stark, and Hammer worked with terrorist Ivan Vanko to destroy Tony Stark. Ivan betrayed Hammer, and Hammer ended up in Seagate Prison. Hammer served 5 years before accepting a plea deal. In exchange for his freedom, Hammer flipped on several other industrialists involved in various federal crimes. He is currently a free man. What can they do? Hammer is a billionaire, although the extent of his actual wealth is questionable. He also owns Hammer Industries, which does some work with the government but is mostly pivoted to creating consumer electronics. Hammer has also been working on a new mech suit to rival Iron Man's, although it is unlikely that it actually works. Why are they on the team? Justin Hammer wants to be the next Tony Stark and sees this new team as an opportunity to prove himself. Val wants Hammer on the team because Val needs an independent source of funding since the mission is off the books, and she knows Hammer desperately wants to be on a team of superhumans. Who are they? Melissa Gold, aka Screaming Mimi, was a member of a group of superpowered female wrestlers called the Grapplers. When the group fell on hard times, the Grapplers became small-time crooks, and were eventually apprehended by the new Avengers led by Black Widow and brought to the Raft, a prison for superpowered individuals. What did they do? Gold has the ability to create a supersonic scream. It can be used as a concussive blast and also gives her the ability to disorient people who hear it. Why are they on the team? Gold is sentenced to a few more years in the Raft, and Val has offered her a full pardon. Who are they? Eric Jostin was a Marine who, on a mission to somewhere, could be Sokovia, could be Latveria, was exposed to a dangerous amount of ionic radiation that altered his cellular chemistry and gave Jostin the ability to alter his height and density at will. The military declared Jostin dead, and Jostin worked with the military and closely with General Ross to study his abilities. Eric voluntarily has not left the military base he's on for 5 years because he's worried his abilities will make him a danger to the people around him. What can he do? Jostin can grow to sizes around 30 feet at will. When Jostin grows, he becomes incredibly strong and durable. Jostin cannot shrink beyond his normal size. Why are they on the team? Jostin believes this mission will finally give him the opportunity to use his abilities for good. He also trusts General Ross, who has legitimately been trying to help him figure out how to cure his condition, so he wants to save Ross. Who are they? Phineas Mason was a member of Adrian Toombs' construction company. When the group's contract was revoked and the team turned to a life of crime, Mason went on to work with the Scavengers as their chief engineer. Mason built weapons for various criminal organizations, and after Toombs' heist of the Stark plane was foiled by Spider-Man, Mason was arrested and imprisoned on the Raft. What did they do? Mason is a genius inventor with the ability to create weapons and devices for any situation. Why are they on the team? Mason was recruited by Val to support the team by creating weapons and everything else the team needs to complete their mission. In exchange for his cooperation, Mason was offered a full pardon. Who are they? Yelena Belova is a graduate of the Red Room who operated as a Black Widow agent for an unspecified amount of time. After an intervention from Natasha, the original reformed Black Widow, Yelena was recruited by General Ross and then Val to complete various missions for the government. Val told Yelena that Clint Barton got Natasha killed, and Yelena tracked down Clint looking for revenge. She learned that Clint did not actually kill Natasha, and that's the last we saw of her. What did they do? Yelena has the standard Black Widow skill set. She is a master of spycraft, stealth, hand-to-hand combat, marksmanship, and can slam a baton into a helicopter. Why are they on the team? Yelena is the obvious choice as the only team member who has worked for Val in the past. She does the mission for money, but also, she is suspicious of Val's motives after the Hawkeye incident. Yelena assumes Val is manipulating the team and will possibly betray them. So Yelena is going to join the team to keep an eye on Val and her mission. Who are they? John Walker was an army captain who, after the disappearance of Steve Rogers and the abdication by Sam Wilson, took on the mantle of Captain America. He was very bad at it. But after Walker came into the possession of a vial of super soldier serum, he took the serum and gained superhuman powers. Then he committed a war crime and was fired from being Captain America. But Walker built his own shield and joined the fight against the Flag Smashers and got a little redemption arc that I believe was completely unearned and utterly pointless. Walker was then recruited by Val to take on the mantle of U.S. agent. What can they do? Walker is an accomplished army captain with expertise in leadership and is also pretty good at throwing that shield. On top of that, the super soldier serum gives Walker the ability to jump higher, punch harder, and rage ragier than your average man. Why are they on the team? John Walker wants another shot to prove himself. So John Walker takes the invitation from Val as an opportunity to save the day and prove he's a good guy. So those are my 8, and only Zemo, Ghost, Hammer, Screaming Mimi, Atlas, Yelena, and US Agent will be in the field. Mason will hang back and act as the team's mechanic. Couple of characters that I'd left out, I'd like to explain myself. First, the team is usually envisioned with either Abomination or the Red Hulk acting as the team's heavy. Red Hulk is tricky for reasons that will become obvious later, and also Val seems to be doing everything we would expect Ross to do in a situation like this, being shady, recruiting anti-heroes, so I don't think we need him in charge. And also, as of recording this video, Abomination has appeared in 2 episodes of She-Hulk, and I would not be surprised if by the end of the series he was fully reformed and wouldn't really fit on a team like this. For that same reason, I'm also leaving out Titania, the Wrecking Crew, Leapfrog, and anyone else that shows up on She-Hulk. Not sure where they'll end up, so I'm going to ignore them for now. There are a couple of other living villains in the MCU. You've got Taskmaster from Black Widow. I do not see a reason to do anything else with that character as they were originally presented. And even if we threw them into this team, what would that add that we already do not have in Zemo, Walker, or Yelena? They're an acrobatic sword-fighting brawler, not exactly original in this lineup. I could see a world where Taskmaster joins a future team and this movie ends with Val revealing that she's finished working on a new operative with the Taskmaster chip implanted directly into his brain, no hardware needed, and he can lead the team in future missions. This can be Tony Masters, but I don't see a reason to rush it. Then you've got guys like Punisher, Elektra, Bullseye, and Luke Cage, who have all, I think, been on Thunderbolts teams in the comics and presumably exist in the MCU in some capacity. I don't love them being introduced here, and besides maybe Cage, I don't think any of them would bring anything new to this team. Punisher and Bullseye are sharpshooters like Yelena and presumably Walker. Elektra is a ninja lady, much like Yelena. Cage is a heavy, which would add something special to the team. Power Man is also on the current incarnation of the Thunderbolts in the comics. You know what? Sorry, Atlas, you're fired. Who are they? Luke Cage was experimented on during his stay in Seagate Prison. As the result of the experimentation, he gained super strength and invulnerability, specifically in the form of bulletproof skin. He escaped prison and returned to Harlem, where he feuded with a bunch of independently snake-themed villains before becoming the head of organized crime in Harlem. Unless he did not, it's unclear. He might have met Danny Rand, aka the Mortal Iron Fist, protector of Kunlun, sworn enemy of the Hand. He may have slept with Jessica Jones and then tried to kill her under mind control. He may have even joined up with those two and Daredevil to form the Defenders, although based on its reception, I'm pretty sure that one never happened. But the basic stuff: prisoner, experiments, bulletproof skin, Harlem, hero for hire. What can they do? Luke Cage has super strength and is bulletproof. He is also one of the more well-adjusted members of the team. And because of his possible connection to Danny Rand, Luke Cage might have a vague understanding of magic in this universe. Why are they on the team? Luke Cage is frequently in trouble with the law, and someone like Val can lean on Cage in an attempt to get him to play ball. There is also something Luke Cage wants out of this, which we'll get to later. Other characters that are not on this team: Daredevil and Wong, the new brand ambassadors of the MCU. Any official Avengers, because Val does not want them to know this exists. Swordsman, although that would be hilarious. Moon Knight, who seems to be a free agent working outside the law. Val would probably see his dissociative identity disorder, as well as the connection to an Egyptian god, as too much of a liability. Bucky. I don't think we really need him with Zemo and Walker on the team. Plus, I don't think he would trust Val. And that's all I can think of. So what is the meat of this movie? The Thunderbolts, Baron Zemo, US Agent, Ghost, Yelena, Screaming Mimi, Tinkerer, Justin Hammer, and Luke Cage need to track down Creel and Stearns before they get to wherever it is they're going. But the heart of the movie is about Zemo learning to respect these metahumans and the rest of them getting over their individual hangups and working as a team. Here are some quick character arcs. Walker hates Zemo and does not want to work with someone he deems a villain. John needs to get over himself. Ghost does not trust people after she was betrayed by S.H.I.E.L.D. and then during the snip, what I call the 5 years between the snap and the blip. She was forced to take care of herself when Bill Foster and all of the Ant-Man team was snapped, so she needs to learn to trust the Thunderbolts because they're not all bad. Hammer needs to come to terms with the fact that he is not very good at being Tony Stark and forge his own identity. Screaming Mimi is afraid to use her powers because they're dangerous, so she needs to learn to accept help from the team, specifically Mason, who can help her control her voice with a special harness he builds, and she can lean into being a superhero. Mason has always been used by guys like Vulture. He needs to be less of a pushover and take care of himself. Yelena does not want to find another family after what happened to the last one, but she's got to learn to be less of a free agent and specifically become friends with Ghost. Luke Cage is a fun one because it's like, what's he even doing here? Well, we will learn that even though it seemed like he's found inner peace, there was always one thing Luke could not get over: Luke always wanted revenge on the guy who caused the fight that destroyed Harlem. People he knew died in that fight, and he wasn't there to help them because he was in prison. So that guilt has always weighed on Luke, but there really wasn't anything that Cage could do with it. Val explains that Stearns was partially responsible and he's on the loose, so Cage jumps at the opportunity to bring him down. And Luke needs to learn to stop blaming himself and spare Stearns. One other fun part of a Thunderbolt story is the idea that these guys need to sneak around. After all, they are being led by a famous supervillain, Baron Zemo. Justin Hammer almost destroyed part of Queens. We will find out that Screaming Mimi killed some people. Ghost is an international terrorist. Mason was connected to Vulture. Really, the only two that are not straight up villains are US Agent and Luke Cage, although public opinion on both is pretty mixed. I think Yelena is cool, although she did beat up Hawkeye on Christmas in the middle of 30 Rock, and people seem to like Hawkeye, so maybe people don't like her either. But it's pretty difficult for a team like that to blend in, so they do it by not blending in. They're going to need to fight a supervillain, so what better disguises for him than as superheroes? So this is that scene. The team is assembled for the first time. Walker is dressed like the US agent, everyone else is in street clothes. Walker sees Zemo. You. Nice to see you, John. Interesting costume. Are you Captain Yemen now? I'm the US agent, and I outrank you. I'm in charge here. No, you're not. Zemo is. You will be taking orders from him for the duration of this mission. After that, you're all free to go. And what's stopping us from leaving now? Well, you could try, but we know where you are, and we know where you'll go, so it's back on the run. Getting out is not the hard part, especially for you. It's getting back home without getting arrested and putting everyone you love in jeopardy. The only way you get this pardon is if you do exactly what he says. No buts. Understood. What's the plan? We know Stearns and Creel are making their way towards an abandoned SHIELD base, but the problem is nobody knows where it is, except Ross. So we need to track them down and get to the base before they do whatever it is they're going to do. I've got a question. How are we going to do that? Our faces have been on every TV, phone, and gas pump in the world. We can't just sneak around, or at least you guys can't. No, as criminals we cannot. But costumed vigilantes are afforded certain privileges these days that we can exploit. You're saying we're going to pretend to be heroes? That's right, I believe this was Mr. Hammer's idea. Thanks, Barry. Yes, I've taken the liberty, branding guru that I am, of inventing new superhero personas for everybody. Mr. Black and White and Red All Over is good as is, since nobody's seen him in that before. I'm going to use my new world-class titanium man armor. I'm thinking for Mason over here, we call you Techno. I've got a suit all worked out, it's really cool, even got an eye patch. Awesome. Damn right. Screaming Mimi. As much as I love the Riot Girl thing, it doesn't scream good guy. Don't blame me, blame society. This guy gets it. Anyway, I'm thinking we tone down the screaming and turn it into singing, huh? Got a bunch of bird-themed guys already, but I like Songbird for you. Luke, Mr. Cage. 2 words. Power Man. Enough said. You, Little Miss Romanov. This one's easy. People already like your sister. Let's not overthink it. White Widow. And then we've got you two. This was tricky. Ghost. So we had to drop the ghost aesthetic, which left me without a lot of options. I'm thinking we do a night thing. What about Miss Moon? And then Zemo. I wanted something that says, I am not Baron Zemo. So I'm thinking, who is the least Baron Zemo person there is? I don't know if you guys remember him, but back in the day, after Rogers disappeared, there were a lot of short-lived copycats. And one of them was named Citizen V. Flag for a cape, sword for some reason. Anyway, he got shot, but people come back all the time. Maybe you're his grandson, I don't know. Point is, Citizen V. Everybody cool? No, this is stupid. Zemo pulls Val aside. Do we really need to do this? The best way to go undercover these days is in a cape. Don't write it off so quickly. You might like it. I'm doubtful, but we don't have time. So everybody gets their silly names and we are doing both Thunderbolts. Anti-heroes recruited by the government for Black Ops missions, and Zemo and a team of villains posing as heroes. It's the perfect middle ground and gets to be so much fun. Only other thing I want in this pitch. So Val has been pretty cagey about the actual mission. What does the leader want with Ross, and what's in the abandoned base? I've got one more scene. It comes about 2/3 of the way through the movie. Zemo and his team enter the base. Stearns walks out to greet them. They sent superheroes. Wow, not sure who any of you are, but I appreciate the gesture. This must really mean it's here. You're crazy. What's here? Oh, they didn't tell you? It's actually a funny story. You see, this one, he was part of a secret program to test the limits of gamma radiation. Totally off the books, wouldn't want the Russians finding out. He recruited a young scientist named Bruce Banner, who figured it out, cracked the code. and made something for Ross, called it the Gamma Bomb. I'm sure you know the rest of the story. Accident turns Banner into the Jade Giant, the program is deemed too dangerous, and it's all destroyed. Except, old Thunderbolt just could not let it go, so he kept the bomb, hid it from everyone, in an abandoned base where no one would think to look. But a while ago, when Ross was making a visit to our little clubhouse, I got a look at his brain, and I saw it. I knew this was it. The key to unlocking our DNA, giving us the tools of gods to cure every disease, solve every problem, make more Hulks. Have you seen him? Like actually seen Banner in action? It's magnificent. Imagine a world of Hulks. We conquer the galaxy, and only I can do it. Lead us into a new age. And what luck, he kept the bomb. So I'm really sorry, but I cannot let you ruin this. So I'm pretty sure this is more fun as a reveal later in the movie, but the leader is after the Gamma Bomb, the original experiment that turned Bruce Banner into the Hulk. That's why they can't call the Avengers. The Hulk can't know the government still has the Gamma Bomb, and the leader wants to use the Gamma Bomb to reverse engineer the Hulk and create his own. And that's the pitch. The Thunderbolts come together, track down Stearns, and save Ross. And they do save Ross, even though he is exposed to a dangerous amount of gamma radiation. Maybe something to look into in a post-credit scene. Either way, this is the Thunderbolts movie we need, the one we deserve, the one with Justin Hammer. And I cannot wait for you to announce this exact pitch in a couple of days at D23. Unless I accidentally upload this video too, and you need to pick a different team, but you know, that's not gonna happen. Listen, Marvel's Kevin Feige, I get it. You're angry because I accidentally uploaded my Thunderbolts pitch to YouTube. Did you really need to retaliate by leaking the Wonder Man casting the day I make an hour-long video that ends with me saying Henry Cavill should play Wonder Man? That felt like a bit much, but I have something to make up for it. In fact, I have 10 somethings. 10 pitches for future Marvel special presentations that I think you are going to love. And I promise I will not put this video on YouTube. Unless I do, I don't know. Let's get started. Werewolf by Night really worked. It fully succeeded at telling a brief, fun story. It fits perfectly into the vibe of the Marvel Cinematic Universe while having a distinct tone and style that makes it feel fresh. It is both completely self-contained, but its 3 lead characters could believably show up in any number of future Marvel projects. I think the case could be made that Werewolf by Night is the most successful individual project in all of Phase 4, and a lot of that comes from the format. The new special presentation is a smaller, cheaper production than a movie or series, which means it's free to take more risks. And it seems like there are a few more of these on the horizon. We know we are getting a Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special before half of them are killed in the 3rd movie. It has also been rumored that a Nova special is in the works, which makes sense since rumors of some Nova project have been floating around for a while. And just the other day, we heard new rumors that a Silver Surfer special is on its way, and it is required to be released before the Fantastic Four movie, which I do not love the implications of there. If the Silver Surfer or Galactus has some sort of cameo in the Fantastic Four movie, I don't think you would need the special presentation to be out there before the movie, since audiences are A, pretty familiar with the Silver Surfer, and B, are pretty willing to go with the MCU projects on some weird cameo that they need to Google when the movie ends. So I imagine that means either Surfer or Galactus will show up in some large capacity in Fantastic Four, otherwise why bother getting the special out first? Either way, it seems like Marvel likes these special presentations. They could become a valuable part of Phases 5 and 6, introducing new characters and concepts that will fill out the universe before Secret Wars. But besides the 3 I have already mentioned, what comes next? Well, I have some ideas. I'm gonna go through 10 characters who I believe could get their own special presentations. This is not a prediction, although I would be shocked if none of them made it to special sometime soon. But probably not all of them. One caveat, no X-Men. only because literally every X-Men could get their own origin one of these. We'd be here all day. So just assume it's these 10 plus every single X-Men. Also, I don't think they need to be 50 minutes on the dot. Some could be feature length, some could be shorter. Right now, in my head, a special presentation is a single, more than half-hour long program that is designed primarily for Disney+. I could see a world where some of them get theatrical releases. I know Werewolf by Night had some screenings. I could see some of them getting paired together to get them to feature length. So like Nova Silver Surfer, that makes complete sense. But these are not all envisioned as exactly 50 minutes long. Some could be 90. They are just one-offs that are created primarily for streaming. They all focus on characters that I think could lead a series or a movie, but because of their lack of name recognition, I imagine you guys would prefer to start them here and see if they hit before you commit hundreds of millions of dollars to a theatrical release. There are only so many movies Marvel can produce and market per year, but something small like a special could be thrown wherever you want into the schedule without causing too much of that Marvel burnout everyone complains about on Twitter. Although it's hard to say if it actually translates to a smaller box office or streaming eyes, but you know, it is something people say. I think in general, people like to say that, like it's a cool thing to say on film Twitter, and even if some of them really do check out completely, I imagine projects like Ms. Marvel or The Eternals are designed to attract audiences that had not been interested in the MCU before, so I imagine there could be a net zero loss. And also, like, people checking out of some of the MCU is okay. The MCU is pretty much comics now, and very few people go to the comic store and say, give me one of every Marvel comic released this week. You follow the ones you like, and then when you hear one's really good, you either catch up or binge the series when it's finished. And if one bombs, don't expect it to be referenced much in the big team up, and if they are referenced, assume the reference will be written with audiences in mind who did not watch the original thing, so they'll be brought up to speed enough to enjoy the rest of the movie. The days of every show being required reading are long gone, and people who complain that they're burnt out on Marvel are all going to see Black Panther 2. They are just burnt out on the Marvel stuff they don't like and have mistakenly forced themselves to watch under the assumption that it will all be on the next big Avengers test, and that's just not how it works anymore. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Anyway, these are the 10 characters who I think could work as special presentations. I'm going to give you a short background on each character, talk about what their presentation could look like, and maybe cast them if I feel like it. So I want to start with a character I have been dying to see introduced to the Marvel Cinematic Universe for a while. Jericho Drumm, aka Brother Voodoo. This special would be a found footage zombie movie where Brother Voodoo stops a horde of zombie-like creatures from destroying New Orleans. I don't have much more in terms of plot, but if you know zombie media, you can fill most of this in. This story is inspired by Strange Tales issue 171, in which Brother Voodoo fights a horde of Zuvembes before learning that they are controlled by a local sorcerer named Baron Samedi, who is actually working with AIM, and the Zuvembes are actually mind-controlled people that Samedi and AIM are using to rob local factories under the guise of a zombie invasion. It's very Scooby-Doo. And you could certainly play it that way, or you could make Samedi an actual sorcerer using chaos magic to reanimate corpses for whatever purposes. It doesn't matter. Point is, I want a Marvel special presentation where Brother Voodoo fights zombies in New Orleans. Why? First of all, New Orleans rules, coolest city in the US, sorry Philly. But also, Brother Voodoo is a pretty high profile mystical Marvel character who we have yet to see in the MCU, sort of. His twin brother, Daniel Drumm, was in Doctor Strange. He died protecting the New York Sanctum. Even had what certainly seemed like the Staff of Legba as his magical artifact. And in the comics, Daniel Drumm is also killed. There, he is a priest of the voodoo magic and goes by the title Brother Voodoo. Then, after his death, Daniel's twin brother Jericho Drumm studies magic with Daniel's mentor Papa Jumbo, avenges his brother, and becomes the new Brother Voodoo. And I know he's sometimes called Dr. Voodoo because Jericho, like Strange, is a doctor, but I like the brother name way more because it fits Jericho's specific powers. After Daniel dies, Jericho absorbs Daniel's soul, and both brothers live within Jericho. This gives Jericho the strength of two men. Daniel is also able to leave Jericho's body and possess other people, but usually he's either in Jericho's head or just floating around him like a ghost. So the whole brother voodoo thing references the fact that one guy is actually two brothers. As far as casting, I want my Jericho to be roughly the same age as Strange, especially since Wong, Clea, and Mordo are all in almost their 50s right now, so someone in that age range would fit nicely. You could do Mark Anthony Brighton again, since Jericho is Daniel's twin brother, but you could also just have them be brothers. If you want a Haitian actor, you've got Jimmy Jean-Louis, who you may recognize from the shows Heroes and Heroes Reborn, who played a character named The Haitian. You've also got Love and Ski Jean-Baptiste, who you probably recognize as the voice of Placide in Cyberpunk 2077. It might also make sense to look at actors from New Orleans, since while Jericho was born in Haiti, he left as a child and spent nearly all the rest of his life in America and currently lives in New Orleans. So perhaps an actor from Louisiana who's familiar with the area and can do a passable accent might be worth considering. In that case, Trevante Rhodes is a little young, but maybe could work. I'm not super sold on anyone here. There's probably a Haitian actor I'm not familiar with. And I could absolutely see a post-credit scene in this special where Jericho meets Doctor Strange, or Wong, or Clea, or Elsa Bloodstone, or Jack Russell, or Man-Thing. If we're doing a Midnight Suns, Brother Voodoo would be the perfect choice to lead the team. Next, I'm going to show you a trailer. After Colonel Luther Manning was killed in action, the villainous Roxxon Corporation harvested his brain and implanted it into a prototype robotic body, which brought Manning back to life with incredible superpowers. Now, Manning hunts for the men that did this to him while patrolling the streets of 2299 as Deathlock the Demolisher. Deathlock was RoboCop before RoboCop. Luther Manning, the first Deathlock, is even from Detroit, the city that RoboCop takes place in. And Deathlock premiered in Marvel Comics a full 8 years before anyone who worked on RoboCop ever mentioned the idea of a half-man, half-machine law enforcer who rebels against his programming. So Marvel should be able to make a movie or a special about their original character. And in case you're wondering, yes, they did a version of Deathlock on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but he skewed closer to the other versions of the character, since the Mike Peterson version is from the present day. The most important thing about this Deathlock is the setting. He needs to be from an alternate future where superheroes are dead and corporations rule. This needs to be an homage to the Verhoeven action movies of the 1980s, your Total Recalls, your Escape from New York's, and of course, RoboCop. But like everything else mentioned so far, played completely straight. None of this 80s parody Kung Fury stuff. Make it like you're just making Dread. Make this a Lee Winnell project. Get Lakeith Stanfield, cover him in silly prosthetics, and give him a big gun. And this special could actually be about something. Like RoboCop, Deathlock is trying to regain his humanity while getting revenge on the company that did this to him. And he is also eventually a time traveler who started in a dystopian future and eventually traveled to the present Marvel universe, and that could be the next leg of his journey. After this special ends, he goes back in time to the current MCU, so he is learning to adapt and rediscover his humanity in a body that is not his own, in a world that is essentially alien to him. And if this really works, you could absolutely bring the Mike Peterson version in as a Deathlock from another future. And this character is certainly on Marvel's radar since Falcon and the Winter Soldier showrunner Malcolm Spellman has increased interest in working on a Deathlock adaptation, specifically not the same one as Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. either. So a Luther Manning Deathlock special presentation by Malcolm Spellman makes perfect sense. And now for something completely different. Howard the Duck. I honestly think it's weird that Marvel has not dipped into this well yet. Howard appeared in both Guardians movies, 2 episodes of What If, and of course Avengers Endgame, but we've never gotten any solo Howard story, and I think that's downright criminal. Howard is not only a pretty fun character, but he's also got a very clear genre that his special presentation can exist within. Howard is noir. This may not have been communicated by his appearances in the MCU so far, but in the comics, Howard the Duck is most known for being a private investigator. But even though he's a talking duck, this special does not need to be a comedy. Imagine a very by-the-books noir thriller, femme fatale, black and white, moody narration, but with a duck. You play the whole thing completely straight, a hard-boiled detective thriller in the vein of The Big Sleep or The Maltese Falcon, but with a duck. People can mention that he's a duck, and Howard can make duck puns, but besides that, this is just a by-the-numbers noir detective movie. No sarcasm, no irony, just a plain old movie. Hire Léa Seydoux to play the femme fatale, throw in Al Pacino for a one-off appearance as a Magia-Don, nothing but prestige actors, and a duck. This would even be a fun place to reintroduce Jessica Jones. Have them meet at a bar, he says Jones, she says duck, and then they commiserate over a drink. And hey, Howard's got a lot of friends. If we wanted to add some of these special presentations together, Howard the Duck and Man-Thing spent a lot of time together back in the day. Howard the Duck also worked in the same building as She-Hulk. His crossover potential is limitless. The next one is as close as I can see to one of these being a sure thing. Squirrel Girl. Doreen Green, the fun-loving, happy-go-lucky, squirrel-themed, non-mutant weirdo is bound to make her way to something soon. Honestly, out of everyone on this list, she is the one I could actually see getting a show or movie. She's a popular character outside of the comics. She's on plenty of cartoons. You can find Squirrel Girl toys at Target. They even almost made the new Warrior show starring Milana Weintraub as Doreen. She's obviously happening eventually. Let's say Squirrel Girl gets a special presentation. Can even time its release with Arbor Day or something. Doreen is a fun character. She started off with one of the most all-time surprisingly upsetting designs in comics, but they softened it significantly over time. She was introduced as an eager teenage superhero with squirrel powers who was itching to make it into the big leagues. Her first adventure saw Doreen and Iron Man, but mostly Doreen, inexplicably take down Dr. Doom. She was then recruited by the Great Lakes Avengers, a team that I will have to make a video about one of these days, and she stayed with them for a while before moving on to the New Avengers as a part-time superhero and part-time nanny to Jessica Jones and Luke Cage's daughter Danielle. Her first real moment came in 2015's Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, which did three important things. First, it established Doreen as a college student. She was still superheroing, but she finally took Iron Man's advice from her first appearance and decided to get a bachelor's degree before being a full-time Avenger. These kind of books are usually a breath of fresh air. Stuff like Batgirl, Burnside, or She-Hulk, or some Spider-Man runs are appealing on the basis that their heroes have relatable problems, rent, dating, that whole thing. So, Unbeatable also filled that void. Unbeatable also reimagined the look of the character. The whole series had a more cartoony vibe than comics are usually known for, which helped sell the larger-than-life adventures Doreen goes on during the series. Which is important because third, it really honed in on the unbeatable aspect of Squirrel Girl. Like I said, in her debut outing, Doreen defeated Dr. Doom. This became sort of a running joke. Using an army of squirrels, Doreen could beat any villain. And in the Great Lakes Avengers Christmas special, Doreen even defeated some of Marvel's most dangerous villains, including Ultron and Thanos, and the Watcher confirmed that it was indeed canon, so she did it. In Unbeatable, she would go on to defeat Kraven and Galactus, however by reasoning with them instead of just overwhelming them with squirrels. So I think Marvel could easily adapt Doreen's origin, turn it into a special. Have her attempt to audition for the Avengers after she meets Captain America, Sam Wilson, in Central Park, and to Sam's shock, One Punch Man's a bunch of A-tier villains like a recreated Ultron or a Thanos from another dimension, and ends with Doreen ultimately deciding she wants to finish up high school before she joins the Avengers, and Cap makes her a reserve member should Kang arrive in the near future. Play the whole thing pretty loose, maybe even animate it. As far as voice, I like Milana Weintraub, and I think she could voice the character again, but she's in her mid-30s, so it's probably best to take a younger actor and have them age with the part. Sophia Lillis feels about right energy, correct age range, and yeah, Squirrel Girl can get the love she deserves with her origin, and maybe make the move over to another team if they ever get a show, which they absolutely should. I promise I will make a video about it someday. Now let's take a quick detour over to a character I have talked about a bunch before, the Sentry. If you saw my fan casting Henry Cavill video, which if you didn't, you should definitely watch it, you know this story, but I think the pitch for a Sentry story almost fits better into the special presentation category. It does not need to be connected to the larger Marvel universe unless it wants to be later on, but for now it's a one-off psychological thriller about a man who thinks he used to be a superhero who everyone forgot. Bob can be played by Jesse Plemons, wakes up one night from a dream that's too real to ignore, and he spends the special digging through his past. We see Bob as the Sentry, inserted into classic Marvel moments. Bob can seek out Marvel characters who've been there from the beginning, like Bruce Banner or Hawkeye, looking for some sort of validation, and they can slowly remember Bob. And then the big twist at the end resets everything, so we never need to see the Sentry again. He can just live forever on those listicles of most powerful characters in the MCU. I would love to see this from David Fincher, or more likely a David Fincher type like Dan Gilroy or Alex Garland, someone like that. Make it dark, confusing. It's Shutter Island meets Jason Bourne meets Superman. Honestly, this is the kind of thing J.J. Abrams could excel at. At least, I guess, excel at directing. Or what about Damon Lindelof? Ooh, that could be fun. I mean, besides Leftovers being great, look at what he did with Watchmen. He could absolutely make a very interesting Sentry special presentation. What's that? You like the Superman thing but want someone a little less Caucasian? I've got just the thing. Blue Marvel is a tricky character, but one we should definitely establish in the MCU soon. He's one of the more powerful characters in all of Marvel Comics. He came up in my Henry Cavill video because he was able to beat King Hyperion in a fight, which is a true accomplishment considering up until that point the only ways to beat King Hyperion were to trick him into lasering himself and get two other Hyperions to fight him. But Blue Marvel just plain beat him up. The style that we should use for this special presentation comes from his origin. He's a hero that was active in the 60s. Adam Bashir was an engineer and physicist who fought in the Korean War and was chosen to work on a government project to harness antimatter. When the project exploded, he and his friend Connor Sims were mutated by the antimatter. While Connor was turned into pure energy and then just disappeared, Adam gained near limitless superpowers from the blast and was transformed into a living antimatter reactor. Adam used his new abilities, all of the Superman powers plus energy stuff, to fight crime as the Blue Marvel. And originally he had a costume that looked like this, and everybody loved him. You may be able to see where this is going. When his friend Connor reformed and fought Adam, Adam's mask was damaged and it was revealed that Adam was a black man, and people in the 60s weren't thrilled. President Kennedy awarded Adam the Medal of Freedom and then asked him to retire. He couldn't have this guy running around saving the world and also be in black. It just wouldn't work. Okay, I'm not giving fictional Kennedy enough credit. In the book, he's torn. He wants to pass civil rights legislation, and Adam's existence has terrified racists. So Kennedy's advisors, including a young Senator Kelly and Bolivar Trask, convinced Kennedy that if Adam keeps superheroing, racists will be emboldened and passing civil rights through a more divided legislature will be impossible. So Kennedy asks Adam to retire, and Adam agrees. Then Adam stops an alien invasion before retiring and living out the rest of his life in relative obscurity. No one saw enough of Adam's face to identify him, so he's able to be a college physics professor and has a wife and kids. Although the wife is a spy, but it's not important. I mean, it's important in the books, but it's not important for this explanation. And when his old friend Connor resurfaces again and threatens to destroy the world, Adam is forced out of retirement by Tony Stark, who makes pretty much every mistake imaginable, but eventually lets Adam do his thing and Adam stops Connor once and for all. I could see a version of this story playing out in a special. The only real problem for me is that it feels a little too similar to me to the story of Isaiah Bradley, who we met in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Black superhero who was forced into retirement by the government. And since the current leader of the Avengers is Sam Wilson, I don't think you could run that script again with Blue Marvel. So we need to have someone else learn about Adam. And Adam is different from Isaiah in that Isaiah seems scarred by his experience and outside of moving heavy potted plants, doesn't have much use of his powers. He couldn't have suited up and fought Thanos. But Adam could have, and he chose not to. One other problem is we have a universe where if Blue Marvel existed in the 60s, someone would have brought him up by now, so his origin needs to be a little lower profile. My best guess at how to adapt this story would be to change it slightly. The whole thing plays out like Bizarro Forrest Gump. Adam fights in the Vietnam War, gets powers, and immediately gets in a big but far more isolated fight with Connor. Adam wins and decides he wants to be the next American superhero, but before Adam has done any public superheroing, Kennedy needs to make a choice. He gives Adam the Medal of Freedom and asks him to retire until racial tensions calm down. Adam agrees and lives his life as a professor. Then Connor, or as he's known in the comics, the Anti-Man, reforms, and Bruce Banner needs to track down Adam so he can help stop Anti-Man. The origin can play out in flashbacks told by Adam to Bruce. They can even meet on a bench to really hammer home the Forrest Gump thing, and specifically the difference between how both men were treated. As far as directors, you need a Lee Daniels or a Steve McQueen. I mean, ideally, you could use this to get Spike Lee in the MCU, but I just doubt he'd do it. As far as casting for Adam, the obvious answer is Denzel, which I do really like. And if you really wanted to get cheeky, you could have John David Washington, Denzel's real-life son, play flashback Adam. Also, after Dolomite, I don't think Eddie Murphy would be a bad choice. It would be a very different role than he's used to, but I think he's got more dramatic talent than he gets credit for. Ernie Hudson, also still going strong. But yeah, Denzel's probably the ideal pick, and they'd be lucky to have him. I think now might be a good time to look at one of Marvel's newest heroes. We need a special based on the origin of the Swordmaster. And no, not him, although listen, we need more of him too, but no, I'm talking about Lin Lee. Sort of a Lara Croft type. There has to be a better analog for that character. But his dad was an archaeologist who took Lee's older brother Fang hunting for an artifact and never returned. He left Lee a sword named the Sword of Fu Shi and a puzzle box. It is Lee's mission to use the sword to find his father. And luckily the sword is magic and kind of alive, so it can help Lee by fighting for Lee and also giving him clues. Eventually we learn that Lee is a descendant of Fu Shi, who is one of 3 warriors known as the Three Sovereigns, who helped helped the Emperor defeat a demon named Shinyu. This was millennia ago, but Shinyu was recently released from prison and Lee needs to team up with the other descendants of the Sovereign to stop Shinyu from destroying the world. I don't want to get into too much detail because this story is pretty recent, but it is an epic adventure on the same level as Star Wars. Unassuming kid learns his father died fighting an evil monster, so he gets his father's sword and goes on a quest to fight the evil. Style is a big part of why this special presentation should work, and I'm sure I'm the millionth person to say this, Swordmaster would be awesome as an anime. In fact, the comic is so colorful and the action is so exciting, I don't think it could work as anything but an anime. This story specifically, get Studio Trigger, who everyone loves and has worked with Disney on Star Wars Visions, and have them give us an hour-long Swordmaster anime. I think you'd want to cast an actor who could voice Lee, but also play him in live action, should the character cross over with the MCU, and I have absolutely zero casting ideas for that. Someone on the young side, early 20s, Chinese, and up for what will probably be some demanding fight choreography. Would also be nice to get Lee involved in the MCU because in his short existence, Swordmaster has crossed paths with a lot of Marvel heroes. Most notably, he was mentored by Shang-Chi. Lee also worked with Jimmy Woo as part of the Agents of Atlas, a team that Marvel could establish if this takes off. Swordmaster could also meet Iron Fist if they ever decide to do anything with him. So hire Studio Trigger, make a Swordmaster anime, drop it whenever, maybe Lunar New Year if you want to tie it to something. This is absolutely something people would want more of. If you want to look at cinematic genres the MCU has yet to embrace, why not look at the one that gave Marvel its start? The Western. Marvel has been making comics about cowboys since The Masked Raider debuted in Marvel Comics #1, released in 1939. But he's not the cowboy I want to focus on. I want to talk about someone called the Two-Gun Kid. Why the Two-Gun Kid? Well, mostly because he time travels a bunch and was most notably brought to the present day by She-Hulk and became a bounty hunter for her law firm. And I think that's a neat idea. Do I have that much actual Two-Gun Kid information? Outside of that, not really. He's a lawyer back in cowboy times and becomes a masked vigilante to fight crime. So not so exciting, right? I mean, very exciting. Cool idea, Nando. This works on its own. Exactly. But, and this was an idea suggested by someone on a live stream, so I'm not taking credit. It was actually XLZ24's idea. Team him up with an Iron Fist. The character comes from Immortal Iron Fist number 17 by Dwayne Swarzynski and Travel Foreman. There is a spirit called the Chi-Lin, but this spirit hunts and kills the Iron Fists on their 33rd birthday. And we learn this in the flashbacks of an Iron Fist named Kwai Jun Fan, who was in the American West during the late 19th century, but is killed by a Chi-Lin disguised as a villager. Run a similar story. Two-Gun Kid happens upon this mysterious warrior who is being hunted by some sort of evil spirit things, and the two team up to stop the evil spirits and save the West. It's Shanghai Noon, a good movie that isn't bad, and I refuse to watch it again so it stays that way. But this would be a buddy cop special set in the American West that introduces us to our first cowboy hero and our first Iron Fist in the MCU. As far as directors, I have absolutely no idea. That's a lie. I actually have one idea, but he would never do it, because this is right up Tarantino's alley. East meets West, kung fu, cowboys, he's done it all before. And hell, make it violent, like less than his usual, probably, but still violent. Also, no racial slurs, but besides that, make this a classic Tarantino special. This next one would be the Marvel spin on an alien horror movie. A team of scientists working aboard the Midas space station capture an alien ship and take the only living thing inside prisoner. They encase it in a bubble of energy while they torture and study it. This would play out like any space horror movie. Alien gets loose in the base, kills the security, tries to escape, but the twist is this alien is a Kree soldier named Novar, aka Marvel Boy. You play this like one half of Grant Morrison's Marvel Boy series. A secret trillionaire named Dr. Midas sets up a space station to capture and study alien life and gets more than he bargained for in the form of Novar. But this Novar is not just another Kree, he is the Kree Captain America, a super soldier with all kinds of weird abilities who also looks like an absolute stud. He has spit that makes you hallucinate, can walk on walls, grows his nails real long, and this guy is a one-man army built to survive and serve the Kree Empire, so he tears through this space station and ends up killing Midas and declaring war on the human race. If we want to redeem him in the future, we absolutely can. He was tortured after all. So someone like Kate Bishop, who he dated in the comics, comics can teach Novar the error of his ways and he can become a young Avenger. But the vibe of this is Alien, but with a superhero. As far as casting, we need a young actor who is known for being very handsome. I don't know who Jace Norman is, but looking at the internet, seems like he's pretty popular and he has the right look. To direct, I would love James Wan. Also just saw Fresh and dug its style, so maybe Mimi Cave. I want a horror director who can have fun with this idea of space alien model killing a bunch of evil scientists. Okay, so we've done cowboys, we've done dystopian future. What other sets are left on the Hollywood backlot? Well, what about a medieval setting? But who lives in a medieval setting, you say? The Black Knight, of course. And no, not Eternals' Dane Whitman. I'm talking about his ancestor, Sir Percy, the first Black Knight. It can be told by the ghost of Sir Percy to Dane, or by Dane to Blade, but this will be a fun medieval action tale, as well as an origin for the Ebony Blade and the general concept of the Black Knight. You see, the short origin is that one of Arthur's knights was a character named the Black Knight. He wielded the Ebony Blade, a sword forged by the wizard Merlin from a meteorite and given to Percy of Scandia. The blade can cut through almost anything and granted the wielder resistance to physical harm and most magic. And as long as you die holding the sword, you are resurrected by it. But the blade also brings out negative emotions, anger, fear, and eventually drives its wielder to madness. It can only be carried by people that are impure of heart. So it's basically the anti-Mjolnir. Guys like Thor can't even move it. You need to be sort of a mess. And luckily, Percy and all of his descendants, including Dane, are messes. So the story for Sir Percy can follow the fall of Camelot and Percy's eventual death at the hands of Mordred. Aesthetically, I think the strongest decision would be to play the medieval parts pretty normal and change the vibe completely when Percy wields the Ebony Blade. Everything gets dark and extreme. We get heavy metal music. Think Dio or Dragon Force or any of the heavy metal bands that write songs about warriors and magic and swords. You could even get one of them to score the whole thing and write an original song. I have no strong feelings about casting. Honestly, not the worst place for Henry Cavill, a one-and-done role about a violent sword-fighting knight. Besides him, I don't know, Jamie Bell, Taron Egerton, Charlie Hunnam. Speaking of Charlie, I wouldn't mind bringing in someone like Guy Ritchie to direct this. He's worked with Disney before on Aladdin. He took a shot at a King Arthur movie that wasn't terrible, so he could do it. Also, most of the Game of Thrones directors could probably work. But personally, I have always wanted to figure out how to rope Matthew Vaughn into the MCU, and maybe this is how. I love his hyper-stylized action. Give me the Rasputin fight from Kingsman, but with knights and heavy metal, and I am sold. This special could also give us a Merlin, who should be an important character for managing the Marvel multiverse. So, I don't know, who's hot right now? Paddy Constantine, Ewan McGregor, Daniel Craig? Yeah, you know what? Daniel Craig should be Merlin. I don't know. Older British actor who can have fun, and luckily for Daniel Craig, he doesn't have to lose a bunch of weight and get in super good shape. He just has to grow a beard and act like a weirdo. And those are my 10. I hope you like them, and I hope I don't see anything in the news about one of them today. Marvel's Kevin Feige, I had an idea. One I cannot stop thinking about, and it's kind of your fault. You see, Kevin, on She-Hulk, a cool show that I liked, you introduced a character named Craig Hollis, who is also known as Mr. Immortal. He's some sort of unkillable superhuman something. In the comics, he's a mutant, but since when he first appeared on the show, I did not hear da-na-na-na-na-na-na. How am I supposed to know if he's a mutant or not? But so I saw him on She-Hulk, and I said, I think I read a comic with this guy a little while back, but I didn't really remember much of it. So I went back and read some of his older stories, and Kevin, we need to make a Great Lakes Avengers show like yesterday. As I'm sure you know, the Great Lakes Avengers were a super team created in 1989 that acted as a sort of parody of the West Coast Avengers. The idea was that a superhero named Mr. Immortal decided, since the Avengers were branching out and covering every coast and they already had East and West, why not have an Avengers for the North Coast, one that protects cities like Detroit, Milwaukee, and all that. And they would name themselves after their nearest body of water, the Great Lakes. After all, the Great Lakes have the longest coastline in the contiguous US. Not that that matters, I just remembered it from school. So, Mr. Immortal holds auditions, gets a few members, all mutants, funny enough. It's one of the only all-mutant teams that is not associated with the X-Men, not for a lack of trying, and they all fight crime and argue together. For a while, they would show up in other books like West Coast Avengers and Thunderbolts. In 2004, right around when the Avengers were disassembled, the Great Lakes Avengers got their own book called GLA Mrs. assembled, which is where we learn a lot of their backstory. This is also when they get their only other member of note, Squirrel Girl. Then some more guest appearances, they win a poker game, Squirrel Girl beats Thanos, that's all canon, and then they get their own Great Lakes Avengers series that ran for 7 issues in the mid-2010s. So, for a team that comic fans sort of know and love, they haven't actually done all that much. But the team itself is such a strong group of weirdos that I don't think they'll ever fully go away. Anyway, you know all that, you're Kevin Feige. But also, here's a breakdown of some of the major players in the GLA books. Don't worry, there are really only 5. I'm not counting Dinosaur, since she doesn't last long and there's not much to her, Dinosaur Alien Lady, who can only speak with one other person. And I'm not counting any of the Grasshoppers, although they should definitely be part of the show. Real quick, the Grasshopper suit lets its wearer jump really high, and that's it. But nearly everyone who wears the suit, and there have been quite a few, dies on their first mission. It's a great running gag, but besides that, there's really not much to Grasshopper. But the core 4. First, you've got Craig Hollis, who goes by the names Mr. Immortal and Mr. I. You know him. In She-Hulk, he's an older man played by the ultimate actor who plays Skeesballs, Veep, and Boba Fett's David Pasquizzi. Now, this version has the same powers as Craig, but none of the depth. And that's fine, because A, this show does not really need to be in continuity, and B, She-Hulk's version has a son, so that son can be this Mr. Immortal. His backstory goes like this. He's a mutant with the power to never die, or never stay dead. This is not a bullets ping off him situation. He gets lit up, and he always comes back. Gets better. In fact, he spoke with Marvel's version of the Grim Reaper, and no, not the character Grim Reaper, that's just a guy. I'm talking about someone else called the Death Urge, who told Craig that he is immortal and will never die. And he's a mutant, but he's not just Homo Superior, he's Homo Supreme. He will see the end of the universe. And if you're anything like Craig and me, that sounds awful. He is constantly forced to grapple with the fact that he will have to watch everyone he cares about die. And if that were not enough, Death Urge makes sure everyone in Craig's life dies early to get him ready for that suffering. Craig's mother died during childbirth. Death Urge tricks a young Craig into burning his house down, which kills Craig's father. His first love dies when they begin to live together, and without spoiling the comics, Craig loses quite a few other people close to him. Mr. Immortal's story is unbelievably tragic. Forget Batman, forget Spider-Man. Everyone Craig loves dies. And while it is not Craig's fault, he's usually involved in their deaths somehow. It's a fascinating look at what an immortal superhero would actually be forced to live through. And remember, this book is a comedy. Then you've got Flatman. He's the second in command when Immortal is temporarily dead or gone or otherwise out of commission. His name is Dr. Val Ventura, and he certainly looks like Reed Richards, aka Mr. Fantastic. That's by design. You see, Flatman's real name is Matt. Get it? Like a doormat, because he's flat? Also, Matt, very cool name. He's a mutant with the ability to flatten his body to about half an inch thick. He's also rubbery and can stretch slightly, and that gives Matt a fair amount of superhuman durability, although nothing crazy. So one day, Matt meets with someone who suggests he could make a living as a Mr. Fantastic impersonator at parties. So Matt goes with it and even falls for this guy who becomes his manager. But when Matt decides he wants something more out of life, his manager tosses him aside and Matt's out of ideas. Until he finds an ad for the Great Lakes Avengers. Matt comes up with the Dr. Val Ventura personality as a way to seem more valuable to the team and keeps his costume that is similar to but legally distinct from Mr. Fantastic's. Val is the straight man of the group, which is a little funny because eventually he comes out of the closet as a gay man. But I mean straight man in the fact that he is grounded, simple, and in over his head. But he wants something more out of life, and the Great Lakes Avengers are the perfect fit. Next up, you've got Doorman. He's a little weirdo. His name is DeMar Davis. He joined the team during the signups like everyone else, and he has the ability to become a door. His powers are always described as teleporting, but that feels wrong. He can stand in front of a wall, make himself into a door, and then you can walk through him and the wall. It's a handy power in specific situations. He's also the Angel of Death. Eventually, after DeMar dies, he takes over for the original Grim Reaper, the Death Urge, who has mysteriously vanished. So DeMar has this side hustle of collecting souls and ferrying them over to the afterlife. A vastly more important task than just helping people get back into houses they locked themselves out of. But because of this, I always read DeMar as one of the stranger members of the group. Not because he is strange, but because he has a job that is so bizarre, and he also hangs out with these dorks all day. DeMar has a greater understanding of the afterlife in the universe than pretty much anybody else. So how could he not be a little strange? He's generally agreeable though, nobody really has a problem with it, he's just a solid member of the team. It's also worth noting that, even though it was unclear originally, Damar eventually took off his mask and met his father, and we learn that he's a black man, which doesn't change much about the character, but it is part of his identity, even if he barely ever broadcasts it because he almost never takes off his mask. And finally, there is Big Bertha. She is too good for these clowns, but she also needs them. Her name is Ashley Crawford, although I believe it was eventually changed to Bertha. She's a supermodel who, to the chagrin of her publicist, chooses to live and work out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Ashley has the mutant ability to alter her shape and change her mass, so originally, Ashley used it to slim herself down and create the perfect supermodel body. But the power also proved useful for superheroing, albeit in the opposite direction. Bertha can gain tons of weight and mass, and with it comes superhuman strength and durability. Bertha is also the only member of the team with enough money to support a venture like the Great Lakes Avengers. After all, she is the most successful model in the area. The group's base of operations is Bertha's penthouse in Milwaukee, and she also seems to fund the team generally. But even though she's got a hot temper and sometimes finds herself at odds with the rest of the team, Bertha really does love the work she does with the GLA. Bertha's agent is constantly begging her to leave Milwaukee and move to New York or Milan, but Bertha's happy where she is. Now, there was another well-known member of the GLA. In fact, they went on to have the most successful career of any GLA member. I'm talking about Leatherboy. Just kidding, that guy is real though. He accidentally showed up to the tryouts thinking it was something else. But no, I'm talking about Doreen Green, aka Squirrel Girl. I talk about Doreen in my Marvel Special Presentations pitch video, but the basics are, she joined the team later than the rest, got very popular, and left. While she was on the team, she saved Christmas and fought some crime. However, her original sidekick squirrel, Monkey Joe, was killed, which was a real bummer. And I think because of that experience, Doreen was never as invested as the rest of the group. In the comics, Doreen presented the intro for each issue with a disclaimer about how the book was full of terrible stuff, highlighting specific pages with particularly upsetting behavior. And that's kind of her place here. She was an outsider who joined the team of misfit friends, fit in well enough from the start, but felt it necessary to warn us that they were a little much, and was never completely comfortable with the team, so it's not surprising that she eventually left. So those are the core members of the Great Lakes Avengers. And when you take out Doreen, who I think would make sense as a Season 2 addition, look what we have. 3 weird guys and 1 slightly less weird girl who hang out together. Does that remind you of anything? Maybe this? Or this? Or this? A small group of friends living in the city having misadventures. Great Lakes Avengers would be an absolutely perfect sitcom, especially because of how much each character fills the classic sitcom archetypes. Let's focus on Seinfeld. Debatably, the single most popular television show of all time. The Seinfeld characters embody 4 specific archetypes, and I was able to find wonderful character descriptions for each on the site SeinfeldScripts.com, so I'm going to go over those with you. Let's start with Jerry, the leader of the Seinfeld Quartet. According to Seinfeld Scripts, Jerry is one of the most normal characters on the show. He shows reasonable behavior and is generally considered the voice of reason among the other chaotic characters. He's fairly well balanced and more or less successful in his career, love life, and friend life. So, the Jerry is normal, reasonable, the voice of reason, well-balanced. Even though originally I read this as Flatman, the Jerry of the group is immortal. If for nothing else besides the fact that things do tend to work out for him, he cannot face the ultimate consequence of a superhero story, he can't die. He also has different love interests and the most agreeable nature of the group generally. Then you've got Jerry's best friend George, according to Seinfeld Scripts. George is an insecure, neurotic, yet lovable character that is invariably dominated by his parents. He's self-aware of his nature, and has in fact blamed his parents' non-divorce in attributing to his less-than-ideal, crazy nature. In other words, George might be the everyday late 30s perpetual, single man looking for acceptance, friendship, and love. That's what makes him so likable and comedic. So the George is insecure, neurotic, self-aware, and looking for acceptance, friendship, and love. In the GLA, this is Flatman. Val, or Matt, is a wreck, constantly trying to regain some sort of relevance. He's the member who jumps at recreating the team because every other part of his life has gone to hell. He is also the most nervous member of the GLA by a mile. Then Elaine Bennis. Normally one to be assertive, confident, and intelligent, Elaine still has those lovable Seinfeld-esque qualities that make her a long-standing favorite character. For instance, Elaine does not take baloney from anybody. She's very firm in her beliefs, and she's proud of it. Elaine is edgy, superficial, and well, she's neurotic too. At the end of the day, she simply cannot help it. The Elaine is assertive, confident, intelligent, firm in her beliefs, proud, edgy, superficial, and also neurotic. It would be easy to just say this is Bertha because she is the single woman on the GLA, but That's not all. Bertha is the most confident member of the team. She knows who she is, what makes her happy, and works hard to get it. She is smarter than the rest of these goobers, and she doesn't suffer fools. Bertha is big and bold. And then finally, Cosmo Kramer, the wacky next-door neighbor. The Kramer is not a bashful character. In fact, he's arguably the most straightforward, wildly dispositional character on the show. For instance, in the episode entitled The Parking Garage, he's caught urinating in a parking stall simply because, well, he has to go. He's unaware of the rules, too. In The Package, he commits mail fraud knowingly, but without any sense of worry, remorse, or cause to refrain from it. Kramer, in one word, is outlandish. So the Kramer is straightforward, unaware of the rules, no sense of worry or remorse, and outlandish. And this is Doorman. He's simple, lives a seemingly carefree life, and he doesn't play by the rules. He's the only team member always in costume. He's a strange guy. So the team members on the GLA map perfectly to the Seinfeld archetypes. It would then follow that you can use those same proven archetypes to create a sitcom about the Great Lakes Avengers in the vein of Seinfeld or Sunny. And there are plenty of actors who could fill those roles. In fact, there's some pre-existing comedy groups that you could use to construct the GLA, who would come with their own style of comedy that the show could be built around. So I want to look at some of those groups to see how they fit the GLA. But real quick before I forget, the show would need to be animated. There is no way Flatman or Bertha would work in live action, as well as they need to in a full show about these characters. Flatman should almost always be flat. Bertha should be able to get huge at the drop of a hat. Just animate it. Think Archer or Venture Brothers, or What If? This kind of comedy can absolutely work in any medium, but the characters can't. I'll go even further. Those two characters, Flatman and Bertha, would be very interesting in claymation. I don't know if Disney's itching to make one of those, but if they were, this is where you start. And yes, Disney, I know, animators are unionized and hard to come by. Well, I don't know what to tell you. Treat them better, pay them fairly. However, I'm going to be casting these teams for both animation and live action, since it would be fun to see them cross over into the real MCU every so often. So alright, let's look at these existing groups. Start with the obvious one, Sunny. The Always Sunny crew could make a Great Lakes Avengers show tomorrow. Glenn is Mr. Immortal, Rob is Flatman, Caitlin is Bertha, Charlie is Doorman. Except, I did say Doorman was black, and while we know they love using blackface, I don't think it would fly here. So I'm gonna make my one consistent sub. This Doorman could be played by Eric Andre. You want a black man who can play a weirdo? He is the best game in town. I know I did say Flatman was gay, and he is, but A, Rob has been playing that sort of role for a while, and B, I don't think Flatman is that kind of iconic character that absolutely needs to be played by a gay actor. However, this is the first part of that casting that doesn't really work. But beyond that, boy can I imagine this one. The bickering, the insecurity. The Always Sunny team does it better than anybody else in the game. Second group, The Lonely Island. I've been a huge fan of The Lonely Island since their first digital short. Saw them in concert, they're fantastic. And I think Andy Samberg would be a phenomenal Mr. Immortal. And while you could throw Jorma on as Flatman, I think you'd be way better off taking on one of their frequent collaborators, Bill Hader, and giving him that spot. He can be pretty cool, calm, and collected 1 minute, and then fly off the handle in the next. For their Bertha, you could go with Hot Rod's Isla Fisher or Pop Stars Imogen Poots, but I actually think you could get more out of Palm Springs' Christine Milotti, and their Doorman would be Pop Stars' Chris Redd. So you have another straight Flatman, but otherwise a very well put together team. Next, I want to look at The State, which, and I can't imagine this is broken through, The State was a comedy show on MTV in the mid-90s. The cast branched out and started Stella, Reno 911, did Wet Hot American Summer, Children's Hospital, some of the funniest shows ever made. Their vibe is much more zany than these other teams, even Lonely Island. I don't think Lonely Island has anything that gets as close to the absurdity of stuff like Stella. We have a real deep bench here. The easiest one for me is Bertha with Wet Hot American Summer's Elizabeth Banks. If not, Children's Hospital's Erin Hayes could be a great pick. Your Flatman could be Tom Lennon, although I could see Ken Marino in that role. Neither are gay, but it's a tough cast for that. And then the big problem, The State is about as white as sketch groups go, so they actually might not fit here super well. Next, I want to give Eric Andre a shot, because as much as I love him as Doorman, I think he would also be a great Mr. Immortal. And his Man-Seeking Woman co-star Jay Baruchel could be an excellent Flatman. Then you've got Britt Lauer, also from Man-Seeking Woman, as Bertha, and then this Doorman is Bad Trip co-star Lil Ray Howley. I think this group could be a lot of fun. Still not a gay flat man, but otherwise, really wild comedians could make this role really interesting. I'll be honest, I don't know much about the kids in the hall, but people suggest them, and I'm sure there's a pairing in here somewhere, but they're overwhelmingly white and male, so that might be a problem. Another group I want to look at is the comedy Bang Bang guys, and by that I mean comedians who run in that circuit. Like Ben Schwartz could be an amazing Mr. Immortal. His energy is off the charts. And you've got James Adomian, an improviser with a ton of range who you've probably seen as either Bernie or the My Pillow guy, who also happens to be gay, could be a fun flat man. Gillian Jacobs could be this group's Bertha, and then perhaps Baron Vaughn or Reggie Watts as Doorman. And then of course you've got the I Think You Should Leave crew. Imagine Tim Robinson as Mr. Immortal, John Early as Flatman, Vanessa Bayer as Bertha, and Sam Richardson as Doorman. But let's say you need to create a whole new team. 4 people who are not a group already, although they may have worked together. Here are my favorite actors out of every possible actor for each role. Let's start with Immortal. I really like Andy Samberg. I find him incredibly charming, but also he's just a big ball of chaos. And that's what I want from Craig. I want someone with the confidence and charisma of Jake Peralta, but someone who is not afraid to be a goofball and act like a fool. I love everything The Lonely Island has produced. I even like That's My Boy. So I would love to see Andy take the lead in a superhero project. Then for Flatman, I wanted to narrow my search a little bit, so I looked specifically at gay men, and boy did I find one in Jonathan Groff. Just the perfect straight man who can react to all of Craig's bad ideas. And also, I mean, just the look is perfect, and obviously he's great. And then Bertha. Easy one for me, it would be like Belle if she was not already character name redacted in Black Panther. But I want to pull from a sitcom that everyone was in love with earlier this decade, Schitt's Creek's Annie Murphy. She's funny, can play a model with the outward vibe of Alexis, but with the spirit of her character from Kevin Can F himself. Doorman is tricky. You need someone who can just be weird. And honestly, if he'd play this part again, Lamorne Morris is perfect. He's got this great goofy energy, he can play quiet but also big, and obviously a ton of experience on a sitcom. And like I said in my special presentations video, Squirrel Girl is Sophia Lillis. I don't even need to explain this one. And I love that she is a good 15 years younger than the rest of these guys. It'll make her inclusion in the group even more bizarre. Do I have a pitch for a season-long arc? No, because there wouldn't be any. A show like this thrives off the characters not learning anything and staying in roughly the same position throughout the entire season. The comedy comes from the different situations they're in. Maybe at the end of the season they could have a big fight with a villain, but it does not need to be a whole arc, maybe just a fun callback. And I have plenty of ideas for episodes, like fun things the different GLA members can do, trouble they can get into. I have even written an entire pilot, 22 pages of a superhero sitcom revolving around 4 characters that could very easily be turned into a Great Lakes Avengers show. And I finally learned my lesson. I am not going to put that script online, but it does exist. It's pretty funny, so, call me. Same goes for you, James Gunn. This could be a reworked Terrifics show, or Inferior 5, or Hero Hotline. Possibilities are endless. In the next video, we're going to cover everything from Deadpool 3 to Blade. But if between now and then you want to watch the actual versions of these movies, like the actual Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, or the trailer for Thunderbolts, that means you're probably going to be doing a lot of streaming. And if you're watching stuff online as much as I am, you should definitely check out this video's sponsor, NordVPN. I've been using NordVPN for years. Like, when I say I've been using it for years, it has been on in the background constantly. When I uploaded this video and all the other videos I've made in the last couple of years, all have been when NordVPN is on, and you never notice it. In independent speed tests, NordVPN has beat out every one of its major competitors. So if you've ever been like, oh, I wish I had better data security, but I'm worried about the internet speed, you shouldn't be. NordVPN has super strong encryption. You can use its over 5,600 servers in 59 countries to check out geo-blocked sites when you travel, especially if you're going to do stuff like connect to coffee shop Wi-Fi. There's also threat protection. It's another optional level of security that blocks anti-malware and intrusive ads and trackers. And at least before I started using NordVPN, when I thought about these, I always figured it was something you had to use on your computer, but no, the traditional NordVPN plan lets you install it on up to 6 devices, and that includes your phone. So you're browsing securely everywhere you go. And if you use my link that's on screen now, you get a massive discount of their 2-year plan. And on top of that, 4 months free. And NordVPN offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it out and make sure you love it risk-free. Again, use my link that's on screen now for a huge discount of their 2-year plan and 4 months free. And of course, I have to thank everybody who continues to support the channel on Patreon. everybody who watches these videos early and ad-free on Nebula, everybody that listens to my podcast, mostly Nitpicking, and everybody that follows me on Twitter and all the social networks. I'm at NandoVMovies, wherever you can find me. That's all I got. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.